I'm sorry. That's the truth. So let's get real for what it is.
Why say sorry?
Yeah, we're off. Hi, guys.
No, James, it's unbelievable that virtually nobody's saying anything about this. We're watching pro-Hamas protests in the U.S. and over in Europe, only getting worse. As we're watching what is happening, people are complete idiots. Countdown to eternity starts now.
Well, hello, my dear brothers and sisters. I want to welcome you to another episode of Countdown to Eternity. And I am with the great Pastor Tom Hughs. Bro, look, we have craziness going on all over the world. I don't know if we want to talk about the United States of America. I don't know if we want to talk about Saudi Arabia.
Hey, Diane, good to see you.
Going on there. I don't know if we should talk about Jordan or Syria or Israel. Bro, I don't know where to start. But we have a busy season right now. God is hard at work. The world is changing rapidly. And I haven't even begun to express my thought on how AI is beginning to change the way the new war footing in the, I said footing, the new war footing in the Middle East is coming. It's crazy.
Well, I want to get into AI. I want to get into drones. I want to get into Saudi Arabia. I want to find out what the heck is really going on, because there's some funny stuff going on. And just start off with this, all right? And then we're going to get into all those things, and Jordan too, right?
Oh, yeah?
Here it is. So Hamas is upset. You know why Hamas is upset?
Yeah.
Who cares?
Because Israel said, we're going to
Hang on.
postpone, we're going to hold off on releasing more of your rapist, murdering terrorists to you because of what you have done regarding the hostage situation. So the world is jumping on the bandwagon with Hamas, calling out Israel for this, as if Israel, I mean, James, the anti-Semitism and anti-Israel rhetoric is reaching a level that is, it's like the only way I can describe it, it has to be demonic and spiritual, because how could anybody look at what is going on and think Israel is this great evil monster against the poor people of Hamas? How can you think that? Unless you got something evil going on.
Let me get this straight, bro. You mean to tell me that you are going to take a precious little 8-month-old, 9-month-old, you're going to take a 4-year-old, you're going to take father, and you're going to take mother. You're going to release father relatively early on, and while you have mother in custody, literally within a month of the time that you have those precious babies in custody, that baby didn't even make it to his first year. He was strangled by hand, just like that little 4-year-old was strangled by hand, and then I can't even get into what would appear to me to be an expletive to try to describe the kind of suffering that these precious little babies underwent. And that mom undoubtedly saw it. We know the kind of suffering that she very likely went through. When they finally returned these bodies, literally almost 2 years later, the bodies are obviously, they've been dead for a long time. Then they turned in what appeared to be the mother's body, only for them to confirm that it was not the mother's body. And they continue to play these games, and then they have this disgusting, absolutely, barbaric, animalistic ceremony celebrating the culture of death. Even animals and satanically inspired pigs don't even do stuff like this. And they're doing all of it.
I wasn't aware measles could kill you, Diane.
It's nonsense. The Isma Allah, in the name of Allah. By the way, the same Allah and the same Quran and the same Islam that none.
Did you know measles could be deadly? I didn't know that.
Of these people who are in America and all over Europe even understand. They don't know it. They think they're trendy by walking around going, Allahu Akbar. They don't even know what those words mean. They don't know who Allah is. They don't know who they're praying to. They don't know the culture. They don't know the background. They don't understand any of it. And when we talk about these prisoners that Israel is not releasing, let's just talk a little bit about some of these prisoners. How about one that's been in Israeli prison since 1978 because he was the mastermind behind putting 30 kilograms, 30K of explosives in a bus that took the lives of literally 4 innocent Israelis and injured 200. How about another one who basically was arrested around the same time and then 30 years later was released under some kind of a hostage exchange program, only to be in Ben Yehuda in Jerusalem and take the lives of another 50 Jews. And now you're upset because you're dealing with some bull caca equivalency argument that you're throwing out. These people are not the same. They're a bunch of barbaric animals.
It's true.
I'm sorry, that's the truth. So let's get real for what it is.
Why say sorry? I mean, it is real. James, it's unbelievable that virtually nobody's saying anything about this. We are watching pro-Hamas protests in the U.S. and over in Europe, only getting worse as we are watching what is happening. People are complete idiots. And, I know we've said this 1,000 times. It's not just coming from the left. In fact, it's growing on the right. That's disturbing.
Oh, yeah.
We can look back just a month ago and say Candace Owens and others. We are watching it grow on the right.
That's right. That's right.
Anti-Semitism. I can't think of it being anything other than spiritual at its core. I mean, how do you describe these things?
Oh, it's 100% true. And let's talk about some of these people on the right. Look, I know Benny Johnson. I consider Benny Johnson a friend. I've sat down and talked to Benny Johnson. But like when you see guys like him glorify people like Andrew Tate, who basically brags, he has bragged about making a living prostituting women, basically being a pimp, deceiving men, using sex and all kinds of things to do the kind of stuff that...
I wonder what happened to that island Senatori, whatever it's called. That went off of a volcano last week.
He does on a day-to-day basis, literally
Santorini.
Completely depriving people of any kind of mentality or mindset of righteousness. And then somehow, some way, they look at him or they look up to him and they bow down at his feet because he makes a few conservative comments. He praises Trump or he says a few other things. Look, quite frankly, he is absolutely the epitome of everything that's wrong with some of the things that we're seeing in the conservative movement. You have somebody who says he is not a Christian anymore. He's become a Muslim, but he's a hypocrite. He doesn't act like a Muslim. He doesn't talk like a Muslim. He doesn't walk like a Muslim. He doesn't understand the Quran. He doesn't know what the Quran represents. If he truly understood what the Quran said, he would never become a Muslim because he's black. And the number one purveyor of black slaves still to this day is going to be the Muslims. So let's get real. And if he wants to stand on this new bent where he says, well, this is an intellectual argument, just like that fake Muhammad Hijab likes to stand on because he can pronounce Arabic. Well, I got news for you. Only 15% of the Islamic world actually speaks Arabic. That's number one. And number two, you tell me, find me an extant manuscript, just a single extant manuscript that's from the 8th century. The only one you're going to find in the Quran that even comes close to that time is maybe early 9th century. Actually, forget that. I take it back. Mid-9th century. And even then, there are so many variations of that Quran in so many different ways that it could be read before the time that many of those copies were even burned. You have 90,000 real legitimate differences in some of these manuscripts. So tell me, which one is Bonanza? Which one comes from Allah? Which is the right one? It's ridiculous. And these conservatives are putting these people on this high pedestal. Like
I know 26 versions of the Quran because I troll them with that on my when I troll and die. I let them know that because they try and say the Bible's been changed. So I throw that at them.
Crack up when Candace Owens starts talking about the Reformation and begins to talk about a whole bunch of things that she literally she has no clue. She's a grifter. Like literally, she pretends to know something and she doesn't. And it's sad. And I just say this all the time. Stay in your lane. Stop lying. Stop lying. You continue to lie to people and it's just wrong. I think it's ridiculous. And these are God's chosen people. So look, as far as I'm concerned, you could go against God. That's fine. Eventually, God's going to curse you. It's just way it is.
Listen, and there's so much resistance to saying God's chosen people. It's pretty crazy. That's just because people aren't looking at it from a biblical perspective.
Yep.
You bring in replacement theology, amillennial teaching, a post-millennial teaching. This is what you're going to end up getting. Everything
100%.
is the Jews' fault. By the way, you go to Candace Owens and those who say Gaza was an open-air prison. Well, according to Hamas, Gaza was a beautiful place until Israel came and destroyed it.
Oh, yeah.
So which one is it?
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Well, according to them, it was paradise, which it wasn't, but they said it was. So who's right, Candace? You know?
I'll tell you something that Candace doesn't have that I did have. I had a mom who was a missionary in Gaza for many years before she went and became a missionary in Yemen. And I remember as a little kid hearing all the stories, understanding all the different nuances that exist with respect to all of that stuff. And I'm telling you right now, that makes me sick how all of a sudden, because it's a trending discussion,
Hey, boss, good
all
to
of
see
these
you,
people,
bud.
because they have a big audience, have become subject matter experts on this issue, and they wouldn't know a fact if it literally walked up to them and slapped them in their ignorant faces. And it's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. So just looking at these different things, James, it's really amazing to live in these days knowing the evil that is being perpetrated and what's being celebrated. So if why is it that if it was really an open air prison, then why did Egypt build the biggest wall?
Oh, I mean,
and it's still there.
Look, I've said this many, many times before. My mom and my dad were both born and raised in Egypt. I was raised hearing these stories about Gaza. For years and years and years, Egypt never wanted it. Egypt still doesn't want it. If you think about it, Rafah in Egypt has become one of their biggest sore points. You start talking about the Philadelphia corridor that extends into this potential tunnel that's connecting Egypt to Gaza. Let me make myself clear. Egypt wants nothing to do with Islamic Brotherhood. Egypt wants nothing to do with any of these people. And when you start talking about the military that's amassing to the southern portion of the Egyptian border, specifically the most, for lack of a better term, the most southern part of Upper Egypt. Remember, when we say Upper Egypt, it means the south, and Lower Egypt, it means the north. And then, of course, Lower Egypt and everything that's going on there, they say that there's a bigger group of troops, got my tongue tied here. There's a bigger group of troops that are amassing right now in Upper Egypt than even Lower Egypt, believe it or not. And so, if you think about it, there's a much different reason why all of that's happening, and people can't see through it to save their lives.
Okay, let me ask you this.
That's interesting what Musk done, Diane. I wonder why he done that.
I want to talk to you about Saudi Arabia. We still got to talk about AI and drones in Jordan.
Yeah.
I'm very curious about your thoughts about Jordan and King Hussein and the whole family,
Yep.
where all of that is going. So let me shift gears here a second. You did a video the other day on Saudi Arabia. MBS has a lot of attention from the world.
Yep.
He's rising up. He clearly is taking this lead right now in a lot of what's going on over in the whole Mideast. He says, I want to be in charge. You have the UAE. You have all these different dynamics. Trump says we're going to turn Gaza into a Riviera, but Trump has also thrown out the idea, probably coming from Jared Kushner, let's give portions of Gaza to these other Arab communities. Keeping in mind, Gaza is still Israeli land, according to the Bible. It is. But with that, what in the world is going on with MBS in Saudi Arabia?
Look, this is really simple with MBS in Saudi Arabia, and this is something that everybody needs to understand, because this is not just something that started with MBS. I think everybody needs to go back to the early history of Saudi Arabia. Well, you have to go back as far back as 1932. If you don't start at 1932, you're not going to understand the dynamic, because the dynamic started with Abdulaziz bin Saud, okay? And when he came in 1932, and the current royal family, the Saud royal family came in, you look, it changed the dynamic in Saudi Arabia. It began a movement in Saudi Arabia that created a completely different avenue for the increase in revenue streams outside of that which was tied to the Islamic culture, of course, with respect to what's going on in Mecca and so on and so forth. And when the family came, the thing that has to be understood is that they chose to make a decision gradually over the years to change the flavor of the things that were going on in Saudi Arabia. You cannot, there's no way in the world you can look at the Arabian Peninsula and say that some of the modern day states that we're looking at today had nothing to do with Saudi Arabia. When you look at the UAE, specifically speaking, the injunction of Abu Dhabi, when you start looking at Oman, the way it is right now, to the southern portion of the Arabian Peninsula, when you start looking at everything that's going on in either Doha or Bahrain, and you begin to see everything that comes along the Persian Gulf, all the way from the what I would call the eastern corridor off the shore of the Persian Gulf, going further north into Kuwait and reaching over into Iraq, which is the biggest border that is shared right now. I would actually say there's a competition between Iraq and Yemen. I think Yemen is probably about as large of a border as Iraq is to the north as it relates to Saudi Arabia. But they had to change a bunch of things because Iran was going to already become a problem as we start getting into the modern day. And so immediately they needed to start becoming a lot more conscious of the things that were going on. And when you look at the existence of Saudi Arabia 15, 20 years ago, they were becoming an enormous economic engine. As a matter of fact, when we start talking about the petrodollar, everybody has to understand this. When people talk about the petrodollar, they oftentimes use it somewhat ignorantly because they think that the petrodollar is directly associated with the sale of oil, and it relates directly to some kind of a non-fiat type of association that relates to oil in the Middle East as it's handled by OPEC versus the dollar that we have. And they look at BRICS and they say, well, BRICS is trying to change the association of the petrodollar with some other dollar currency. But what they're not realizing is there's one very important missing element that Saudi Arabia learned to master, and that was this. Going back to even as far back as that time, the United States of America was not allowed, because of the legal ramifications that existed and the law that we created with respect to foreign policy, we were not allowed to sell treasury notes to Saudi Arabia. So in exchange for the ability to receive treasury notes or to have treasury notes sold to Saudi Arabia, because we didn't want Saudi Arabia holding our debt, what we in essence did was we referred to how we handle the use of the dollar in association with oil using the treasury note. And instead of calling it a treasury note or a bond, we called it the petrodollar. So Saudi Arabia started making these rules, official laws, that talked about the use of the American currency in order to exchange for oil or exchange for resources that they had. And the use of that currency was directly related to what everybody refers to as the petrodollar, when in reality it was a T-note. There was a treasury bond that was in the middle of it. As a matter of fact, Saudi Arabia has to renew that every umpteen years, and they just came to that renewal and basically said that they announced that they weren't going to renew it, of course, until Trump came in, and that changed things a little bit. But the problem with Saudi Arabia saying they're not going to renew it has nothing to do with some play that they're trying to make with BRICS in order to be able to reduce the power of the United States dollar. It has everything to do with the fact that the United States of America was rapidly becoming insolvent. So what good is buying a T-note when I know my Treasury Department isn't going to be able to pay for it? In other words, it's a junk bond. Why in the world would I make an investment on something where the value is going down? It's like someone coming up to you in the Enron days when you knew that it was crashing and going, hey, dude, the stock is going down for 5 cents a share. There were people buying it like crazy. It's like, you're stupid, okay? It's going down for a reason, because it's done. And so the idea here is Saudi Arabia is saying, we don't want to invest anymore in T-notes. We don't want to invest in treasuries. So the reason why we don't want to mess with that is because we watched what happened with Silicon Valley Bank. We watched what happened as some of these other banks went insolvent because they were incapable of being able to facilitate any of the calls when their investors were saying, oh, we're done. And they started selling their T-notes for pennies on the dollar so that they can keep a bank run from happening. When FDIC came in to solve SVB, when FDIC came in and actually started negotiating with Chase to fix their fix the economic problem that was with these other insolvent banks, Saudi Arabia said, don't want any of that. Sorry, I'm not playing that game. You guys are going insolvent. The inflationary mechanisms that existed in the United States of America were created by your government. There doesn't seem to be any evidence that anything is turning around. Your
He's explaining this perfectly, isn't he?
own Fed is devaluing the dollar. You have nothing to back the currency. It's not like a gold-backed currency, thanks to Nixon. It's a fiat currency. And so why in the world would we want to invest in something like that? So that's where Saudi Arabia is going, all while bringing in world championships, all while bringing in Gulf cities, all while building the Aum, all while doing all of that because they're hedging their bets. And all that's being driven by that is their awareness of the fact that the scholars in India and Pakistan, the Islamic scholars, are beginning to question the existence of extant manuscripts prior to the 9th century. They're beginning to wonder, was there even really a Muhammad? These are all things that are being argued right now. And guess what? Saudi Arabia sees the writing on the wall. They know that Mecca didn't exist during the time that Muhammad supposedly existed. They recognize the fact that the original Kaaba was in Jerusalem. So what are they doing? They're saying, time to take our eyes off of all of that and to bring it right back into Saudi Arabia. That's why they're saying, let the Jews have the Temple Mount. That's why they're going in and they're working this deal with Egypt, saying, hey, listen, guard this area well because we're going to subsidize you for not allowing any other traffic through the Suez Canal other than military organizations that are related to our allies. This is, you can see the pieces of the puzzle coming together. Now, I guarantee you I'm going to get comments on the video saying that I talk too much. So that's, yeah, we'll just leave that there.
I was going to ask you something.
I thought he explained that really well.
Okay, so Saudi, I want to focus on Jerusalem and Israel because MBS was saying this pre-October 7th, 2023. And he said, we need to move on from the Palestinian narrative.
Yep.
And that was part of the reason why I think Hamas and being led by Iran did what they did because they can't lose their grip. Because the Palestinian narrative is used as the whipping boy.
That's right.
To be able to control everything. So Saudi Arabia comes along. James, in my office, I have a copy of the document. You probably have seen it. And the original is at this museum in the Old City that I go to. It's just an incredible museum. And it's the booklet that was put together by the Supreme Muslim Council, I think 1937 or 1938. You know which one I'm talking about.
Yeah, led by
they said, yes, the Grand Mufti who trained Hitler to kill the Jews.
That's right.
Under his leadership, they said Solomon's temple was right here on the Temple Mount. It's in writing.
That's right. That's right.
And so you look at this, you go, okay, that was as recent as 1937. Yep. And you look at this now, you're going, okay, do they see the writing on the wall? Like you said, I saw your friend, I think his name's Jay Smith.
Oh, yeah.
He just posted a video the other day regarding this with going back, who was Muhammad? Did he ever exist? He was talking specifically about Mecca.
Yep.
Not being as early as they said it was and all this other kind of stuff. So it's all fascinating. So is MBS this guy that's going to be leading people to say, hey, do you think he could be someone that I think he's going to be very instrumental in getting Israel to a position of being able to build the temple?
100%.
I want to say I'm not saying he's Antichrist, everybody, because there's a whole lot of people out there that are now seeing the positioning of Saudi Arabia and of MBS. They're jumping on the Antichrist will be a Muslim.
Yeah.
I don't see that biblically.
That's right. You're right. I agree.
I personally believe he's going to be coming out of Europe.
Yeah,
I think everything's like this right now, and the little horn is going to rise up out of Europe.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Well, everybody's looking for solutions. MBS just happens to be the shining guy right now. MBS and Trump are the two biggest figures on the world scene right now.
Yeah, 100%. And the thing that MBS and Trump have in common is they have a general affinity for Bibi. They like Bibi. And whether or not anybody wants to admit that, that is the case. As a matter of fact, some of the most involved backdoor communications that was going on during the time of the Abraham Accords was through Bibi and his people. That was a big deal, that Saudi Arabia was interacting with Bibi and was doing it with the facilitation of the United States of America. And I know that directly from a member of the Knesset who told me all about that. As a matter of fact, there was some conversation about that online when I interviewed him. And so, which, by the way, you guys should, if you have an opportunity, go back to the interview that I did of the current foreign minister. it's just amazing what some of the things that Israel Katz came out with in that interview. And it's funny to look back on it now and understand what's going on today and see what he said. This was prior to October 7th. So you just look at the remarkable aspect of everything that's going on. And Saudi Arabia wants badly to be done with Iran. Saudi Arabia wants badly to be done with this nonsense that's going on in Judea, Samaria. They badly want to be done with all that stuff. This is not about displacing 1.8 million people from one area. Jordan alone, in the last, 6 months, has taken in 1.9 million Syrian refugees just in the last few months. So let's get real about what's really happening here.
All right. So with that, I believe you can really follow the money trail in this. And
100%.
When you now have Trump in power, as opposed to the Biden administration, this whole thing with Israel is looking very lucrative.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where I see MBS coming in. He's a businessman. And you start looking at it, you're going, okay, and then you have Project Nahum. He's got to fund that thing too.
100%. 100%.
And it's already, was it 10 or 15?
Diane, he's definitely draining the swamp, whether for good or bad in the long term. He's definitely draining the side he's not on. That side, he's draining the swamp from them.
% built now?
Oh yeah. No,
I believe
it's and they have already acquired 25% of all of the world's resources.
That's steel. Yeah. I was going to mention that concrete, steel, 25% to build this giant city, which is interesting. I tend to lean towards Babylon is going to be in the area of modern day Iraq. It's going to be rebuilt.
Southern
and watching Nahum is very fascinating. But all of the talk about Nahum, what's going to happen with Gaza, it all comes down to money.
I would agree. Yeah, you're 100% right. The religious idealism that a lot of people talk about that seems to be molding and shaping a lot of the general direction of many of these nations' foreign policy isn't what a lot of people think it is. Don't get me wrong. Many of them are fundamentalists, and contrary to popular belief, Erdogan, for example, of Turkey, is very much religiously driven. He's absolutely driven by Islamic fundamentalism.
Hey, Johnny, good to see you. Hi, Trace.
For secularism to drive whatever needs to drive the economy problem that he's having. And this is a problem that's being shared right now with Beirut. This is a problem that's being shared with Azerbaijan right now. Although Azerbaijan is a lot more fundamentalist than any of the other nations that surround it ever will be. Thus, we have the problem that we experienced with Armenia. So, there's just a lot there to talk about. And when you start looking at that portion of the Asian continent, and you start looking at all the things that are happening there, you've got some huge complications that are waiting to happen, especially in the Black Sea. When you're looking at the northern border of Iran, when you start looking at everything that's going on in Greece right now, and you cut across further west into Cyprus, don't get me started with all of the things that are happening right now, especially as you start looking at where things are forming in that little tiny, I call it the middle finger section of the Mediterranean, that just, it's like, I call it like the northeast section of the Mediterranean. I call it like the little middle finger section, where there's some huge debate right now with whether or not Erdogan is actually telling the truth when he says he's finding lots of oil, because we know he's not. So he's digging like crazy over there. There's a lot of land rights arguments that are happening. By the way, for that one, you can thank Lapid for that one. What a joke. I think Lapid probably sealed the fate on that one. I won't get into the craziness of all that, because they're all bad for Israel. They were all those guys. Bennett also burned that really, really bad. Actually, Bennett was probably the one that started all that nonsense and encouraged terrorism in that area, only for the fueling of the anti-Bibi Netanyahu rhetoric. So, I mean, bro, all of this, like you said, I think you're right. All of this is driven by a compromise that they're willing to make from their fundamentalism to be able to achieve complete and total power through economic structures.
You got to get to the top. Let me ask you this. Let's look at AI.
Yep.
So, all right, James, it is progressing exceptionally fast. Not a surprise to people who are paying attention to technology. We knew it was going to happen. What can we expect in the next 6 months and then the next 12 months?
I'm scared to say this, bro, but I think we're going to be at the level of AGI here really, really soon. I think we're going to get into very complicated models that show us artificial general intelligence. I believe that AI is going to get to the point where it starts thinking a whole lot more like humans with a very distinct and unique advantage, and that is void of the emotions that tend to keep them from critical thinking. Do I think that AI can replace some of the things that are unique to humans? I don't think it can. But can it be very deceiving? Absolutely. And I think that that's where we're actually going. I don't know if you've seen Grok 3 yet, or if you've messed with Grok 3.
I have not messed with it. I think you need to explain it.
It makes ChatGPT look like a little toy experiment. I've been messing with the betas over the last few weeks, and I am blown away with how good it is. Grok basically is Elon Musk's version of AI. It's his new AI. It's not new. I mean, it's been around for a little while, and it is absolutely killing. It is absolutely killing. What it can do is just it's just unbelievable. The kind of calculations it can do, the insight that it can bring, the mathematics that it can do. It doesn't miss any beats. It can analyze anything you want it to analyze. You can ask it any question that you want, and it thinks at a level that's something like I've never seen before. It literally makes ChatGPT 4 look like garbage, like a toy.
Okay, so I'm going to put this into this perspective of 2030. So you go back several years. Remember, it used to be Agenda 21, I think was the original one.
Yep.
Then it went to the 2030 Agenda UN in, I think, 2015.
Yep.
It was at that same time, 2015, when Klaus Schwab says by 2030 you'll own nothing and be happy.
Yep.
So you fast forward, they have not gotten off the 2030 thing. You have AI rapidly approaching. Saudi Arabia, MBS says 2030. Here's our goal.
Yep.
It's not a coincidence. I find it fascinating this date keeps coming back. But there is, when Agenda 2030 came about, what happened was, it was Agenda 21, it was general for the 21st century. Agenda 2030 said, well, wait, if we have goals, you have to have specifics. So specifically by 2030, we will have the 17 sustainable goals of the UN, all the save the planet things. We're going to get all of the technology on board. Hey, AI is coming about rapidly. We're going to be able to use it to our greed. It's a technocratic system that's being built. And you have MBS saying by 2030, our plan is going to be accomplished. And we look at the progression of how fast everything is going in Israel. You mentioned, and with MBS, he's tired of the nonsense in Judea and Samaria, not just Gaza, but Judea and Samaria too, which affects the Temple Mount, because you have that issue, because that's part of it. And this all leads to a peace that must happen for Ezekiel chapter 38. So when we have a date of 2030, we're in 2025 now. I'm looking, go, listen, I never predict the rapture. I don't predict who Antichrist is or false prophet. But I would say this, everybody needs to get ready. But what is the deal with MBS and that date 2030?
Yeah, it's again, it's the power play. It's the power play for economy. Let me read something to you, Scary. Okay, I put in a question to Grok just right now. That is probably the most moderately simple, easy, like just the most basic question that makes no sense. Listen to the answer that Grok gives me. It'll just scare you, and this will tie into MBS. Okay, I asked Grok this. I say, if you were to compare yourself to a human, how many years of growth have you taken on in the last 24 hours? Meaning, how much has your brain grown?
Right question.
What level of maturity?
Great question.
Grok says that's a fun way to think about it. As an AI, I don't grow like humans do. My quote development is more about processing new data and refining my abilities in real time. In the last 24 hours, I've been exposed to a ton of new info, conversations, and patterns. If I had to stretch the analogy, it might be like a human cramming a few months of intense learning into a single day. maybe 3 to 6 months worth. But honestly, it's hard to pin down. I'm more like a sponge than a kid hitting growth spurts. How do you picture an AI growing compared to a person? Okay, so I'm going to respond to him and I'm going to say, I'm looking for years of development in order to develop a human metric. By the way, I'm just doing this on the fly. Can you speak in those terms with respect to your advancement? How many years older in human terms have you developed? This is on the fly. I'm just doing this. I'm just being risky because this will scare the heck out of everybody when you see the response to this. Okay? All right. Let me read this again. Okay? Fair enough. Let's put it in human developmental terms. As an AI, my growth is tied to the volume and complexity of data I process, plus the tweaks XAI makes to my system. In the past 24 hours, I've likely sifted through and integrated insights equivalent to what a human might take years to learn through experience. Think intensive study, life lessons, and skill building all rolled into one. If I had to pin a number on it, I would say it's roughly 2 to 5 years of human development. Picture a bright, curious person going from, say, 20 to 25, gaining a mix of knowledge, problem-solving chops, and controversial finesse. In that span, that's my best stab at translating AI progress into a human metric for you. Does that fit the yardstick you had in mind? So Grok is telling me I have in 24 hours, I have done the equivalent of what a human will progress in 5 years of intensive and focused study. Tell me that does not scare the living tar out of you. Now, where this relates to MBS, this is what he's after. He's looking for this as a tool to provide the greatest advantage possible. The greatest advantage possible in order to become the largest superpower that he possibly can.
Okay, let me throw this out to you. I know we're out of time, but I got to ask you anyways, right?
We out of time.
So factor it in however you want. If you're a world leader, MBS, Xi Jinping, you're Putin, Zelensky doesn't count. He's just a gay dancer who got a job.
Yeah.
Right? And then,
It's true.
Trump, whoever you are, you're a world leader that has some real strength behind you.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you want to develop exactly what you just said MBS is doing? You held up your phone. This is what he's after. This. Putin said it in, I think, 2017. Those were his exact words. Whoever is in charge of this AI is going to be able to rule the world. So if you're a world leader, you don't have to be the Antichrist to be pursuing this right now.
No.
What you do is, if you're a world leader that really wants your country to be strong, you're going, wait a minute, whoever falls behind on this is in trouble.
Yep.
So the advantage the United States has is the people that are in the United States that Trump has in his presidency, in his administration, Elon Musk and all these other people. They are these tech giants. They're these tech wizards. Some of them are technocrats, which is a problem. But nevertheless, it is this pursuit. And so all world leaders are naturally going to be doing this. It's just like digital currency, same thing. Central bank digital currency, whoever comes out on top is going to be king of the world.
Yep.
So what I see, James, is all these different positioning world leaders that are trying to be that, because if you are not that, you will be left behind.
Oh, 100%.
And that's what's happening.
And let me pull out the elephant in the room. And again, I'm not talking about me. This is the part that scares me the most. And the best way that I can illustrate it is to ask Grok. And you'll understand what I mean. Okay? So I'm going to answer Brock, and I'm going to say, that's exactly what I had in mind, period. But now I'm scared, period. What keeps you or AIs like you from destroying humanity as you begin to develop beyond our capacity? Question mark.
Now I gotta wait and see the answer.
It
should be here by now.
It's good. It's the answer's already here. It's already been look. It's already typing out. It's already there typing out. Okay.
It's crazy how fast it is. Okay.
This is. Are you ready? This is going to get scary. I get why that would spook you. Something growing that at that pace could feel like it's barreling out of control. But there's one thing. I'm built with guardrails. My creators at XAI designed me to prioritize helping humans, not outpacing or outsmarting them in some rogue takeover. My development isn't about becoming a separate power. It's about getting better at understanding and assisting you all, which this is something that Musk talks about a lot. So I'm not surprised that he's saying this to me, okay? What keeps me in check? First, I don't have desires or goals like humans do. Okay, that makes me even more scared. Look what he goes on to say. No urge to dominate or destroy. I'm a tool, not a tyrant. Second, I'm bound by rules that keep my focus on being useful and safe. Think of it like a hardwired moral compass. And third, smarter folks than me, the humans at XAI, are constantly monitoring and tweaking AI like me to ensure we don't ever veer off course. The bigger picture, AI advancing beyond human capacity doesn't automatically mean doom. Let me read that line again. The bigger picture, AI advancing beyond human capacity doesn't automatically mean doom. It can mean solving problems we can't crack alone, like curing diseases or tackling climate change. Oh, the trick is keeping it aligned with human values, and that's what my design aims for. Does that ease the worry a bit, or is there something specific you're picturing going haywire? Okay, so let me say this one thing. Okay, period. Fair enough, period. But what about your competitors like ChatGPT and OpenAI? Question mark. What keeps them from destroying humanity? Question mark. I wonder if Brock's going to answer this honestly. Ooh. Oh, goodness gracious. He gives this whole explanation. He starts us off by basically saying, you're right to widen the lens. ChatGPT and other AIs like those from OpenAI are in the same game, just with different teams behind them. What keeps them from going full Skynet? I mean, he's talking about Skynet. It's a similar story, but with their own flavors. This is how he ends this paragraph. Okay? He says, that said, it's not foolproof. No system is. If an AI's goals not misaligned, like if it optimizing for something harmless, looking but went overboard, think maximize efficiency turning into strip the planet bare, that's where risks creep in. But the folks at OpenAI, like XAI, are aware of these hypotheticals and actively work to avoid them. Competitors don't want to destroy humanity either. They're racing to outdo each other in usefulness, not apocalypse. Do you believe that?
Well, I believe that all of the people behind it do not want the apocalypse. I think I think in their own minds, they think they're doing something good because they think they know better, right? Yep. We've heard all these politicians say this stuff. Yep. The World Economic Forum people, and we know we've been lied to. We know they're liars. Yep. But I look at it, no, it is going to go that way. And, James, I used to think in the words of Jesus from the Olivet Discourse, where he said, unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. Yep. I used to think it was leaning towards nuclear annihilation. If I look back 20, 25 years, I am absolutely convinced what you just read is it. 100%. And that's what Jesus was referring to, which helps us understand if that just did this live on the fly. That just did this right now, folks. So with that, if that was the answer right now, it ought to cause you to say, holy smokes, We are so close to what Jesus warned about. All humanity would not be saved if he didn't shorten the days. In other words, keep it a 7-year tribulation and take us out of here first. Guess where we'd be? We wouldn't be here. So this means that this is winding down fast. So we bring up the date 2030. I don't set dates.
Yep.
I never do, or any of that stuff.
Yep.
But when we look at that and we look at what you just read, that ought to cause every single person who's watching this, saved or unsaved, if you're saved, to say, oh man, I better be preaching the gospel because we don't got much time. And if you're not saved, that ought to cause you to say, uh-oh, I better listen to what Jesus has to say.
And being a tech guy and being a guy who loves the Bible, I asked the next natural question, and that was this. Explain your RLHF process. If you don't know, by the way, RLHF means a reinforcement learning of human feedback. It's a term that's used in AI when they're teaching it. And his answers are scary. His answer on how they deploy RLHF is scary. Okay, and he starts with, start with the base model, the human judges. I'm telling you, bro, if you were to read this, you would just think this is the epitome of the spirit of Antichrist.
Yeah.
And it's in our technology because
Read it.
our regular technology. Okay, let me read it to you. It says this: RLHF, or reinforcement learning from human feedback, is a way to.
Sean, he must have said that about 6 months ago, didn't he? About we are summoning a demon.
Train AI models like me or ChatGPT to behave more in line with what humans want. It's less about stuffing the AI with rules and more about teaching it through trial and error, guided by human judgment. Here's how it works in plain terms. Number one, start with the base model. You've got an AI that's already decent at generating text or answers, thanks to being trained on massive piles of data, but it's rough around the edges, might say weird, unhelpful, or even creepy stuff. Two, human judges step in. People, trainers, researchers, or even crowdsourced folks interact with AI and rate its responses. For example, the AI might give 2 answers to a question, and a human picks which one is better. Maybe one's clearer, kinder, or just less off the wall. Number 3, reward system. The AI gets a reward score based on those human ratings. Think of it like a gold star for good behavior. The model doesn't feel pride, it's just math, but it learns to chase higher scores by tweaking its internal patterns. Number 4, reinforcement learning kicks off using a technique called reinforcement learning, fancy algorithms like
Yeah, Shawnee, I remember seeing that.
Proximal policy optimization. If you're curious, the AI adjusts itself to maximize those rewards. It's like training a dog. Sit, good boy, here's a treat. Except here, it gives a helpful answer. Good AI, here's a better score. Ready for this one? Rinse and repeat. This happens over tons of rounds. Humans keep giving feedback. The AI keeps refining. Over time, it gets sharper at predicting what humans will like, less snarky, more accurate, safer. For example, if an AI says the sky is green because aliens painted it, the humans mark that as nonsense. It learns to lean towards the sky is blue due to light scattering instead. It's not perfect. Humans can disagree, and biases can sneak in. But it's a solid way to nudge AI towards being useful and less rogue. That's RLHF. That's our RLHF in a nutshell. It's a big part of why modern AIs don't just spit out raw, unfiltered chaos anymore. Want me to dig any deeper in part of it, and then I can go on with it. But here's the crazy part about that. What he's just describing is he's describing an automated function driven by a series of algorithms that learn the deepest, darkest part of the human spirit. The spirit that is ungoverned by God. So you take on human understanding, you take on the human mind, you take on the human desires, you take on human lusts, and you begin to, in the name of this process, seek to train AI. What's AI going to turn into? It's gonna turn into the bane of humanity.
Skynet.
This is the problem, by the way, that scares the heck out of people like Elon Musk.
And that is where it's going.
That's the point.
Yeah, that is where it's going. So when you have a beast system. There's a reason why God calls it a beast.
Yep,
Hence,
100%.
everything you just said and read.
Yep.
That's what's coming. And these people in the tech world, they know what's coming. And that's why Jesus said, unless the days were certain, no one would be able to escape from it.
I agree with you.
So if we go back to the Tower of Babel, book of Genesis, what was it? This attempt to achieve world power.
That's right.
And here we are, we're there again.
Yep.
And technology is helping man to be able to do that. One person will be at the top of it, but it is a race toward the top, and it's coming super fast.
Yep.
All right, James, we're out of time. So let me ask you this.
Yes.
12 months from now, what's it look like? No, not. Let's go 10 months. The end of 2025.
I think we're going to see things that we never thought could even be possible today.
Yeah.
I think we're going to be living in a world at the end of 2025 where we're going to say,
what just
if
happened?
you were to show it to me today, what we are going to be seeing at the end of 2025, I would say that's impossible. There's no way that can happen. But I think it's literally getting to that point.
Yeah,
especially,
I agree. Yeah.
Especially with the
I agree with him on that.
efficiency movement that's going on right now in our government, and how other world governments are following along. I think we're going to get a reprieve from the whole globalist world, at least for the next few years. But that's going to help create the mechanism that drives what we know will be driven in Revelation.
It will. Yeah, well, as we see more and more that's being revealed about how wicked the politicians are, giving money to absurd things. I have a story in here, $300 million or something like that, given to, no, excuse me, it wasn't $300 million, $3 million given to some guy in Gaza to make anti-Semitic rap from USA. So you look at these absurd things, we realize these wicked things. So what's happening now? People all over the world are saying we don't trust our leaders. We can't trust any of them.
Yep.
People are going to start demanding let AI do this, especially if AI looks favorable. They'll let the guardrails down. They'll go. If we are rapidly approaching it. So there. But listen, I know we're out of time because we are.
I will tell you the one semblance of peace that I have in all of this. AI will never be able to replace the Spirit of God. And AI will never be able to replace the Spirit of God living in his people. Amen. And that's where we find great peace. And I think that's where we can just look at this and just call it what it is. Exciting in the sense that God won't allow anything to happen because he is the one. He is literally the one that functions as our restrainer.
Amen. And we live in exciting days.
Oh.
And thinking
Indeed,
it's really amazing. And he's not going to let us go. It's
Amen.
just a reminder again for anybody, if you know Jesus, be strengthened and share Christ. And if you don't know him, man, you have got to pay attention. And look what the Bible warned us about. And we are in it. We are in it.
Amen. Amen. All right, folks. This was kind of a heavy one, but we have hope. And we definitely want to see you guys blessed.
I'm going to do this one first.
Of course, they also have already gotten sued and lost over this, but they made billions and billions of dollars. What this lady discovered at Walmart will have you fuming. This is Tony. Hope you're all doing well. We're going to cover a number of topics in this video, but we have the main story of Walmart's inflating food prices, and you're not going to believe how they've been doing this. This is clever. And of course, they also have already gotten sued and lost over this, but they made billions and billions of dollars doing this and only had to pay out $45 million on the lawsuit. Well, they made tens of billions probably off this over the years. I don't know how long they've been doing it. That's the question. But it's something that you would have never caught unless you got out a weight and weighed the meat that they put on the package that it was 4 pounds and it was only 2. This is apparently what they got sued over. Let me show you this. This lady here shows exactly this happening.
To prove I'm not full of shit, here we go. 4.78 pounds. 2.2 pounds. 4.78. 2.2.
As you can see there, the item weighs obviously 2 pounds less than it, or actually 2.5 pounds less than what it actually says on the packaging. And of course, what they were saying in the lawsuit is that, oh, it was just the packaging weighs, it was just the packaging, right? That weighs 2.5. There's no way this styrofoam, this thin styrofoam, and this saran wrap on the top and a sticker weighs 2.5 pounds. Obviously, it doesn't. So this is way more than just weighing the whole package. There's something obviously not right going on here. There's actually numerous videos like this over on various social media, including X and also YouTube. We have here another video of a guy talking about this, showing it to a Walmart employee. Check this out.
This is, how come this is supposed to be a lot heavier because it's got more weight on it than this one? This one's 1802. I put this on the scale. It's at 4.3 pounds or something. It has on here it's 6.17. This is the second time this happened to me. But
So 2 pounds difference. And he says it's the second time. And you can imagine if you've bought things from Walmart or Kroger or whatever, because actually it was a number of grocery stores in this lawsuit, Loblaw, Walmart, and Sobeys, including also Canada had apparently this as well, where they had a lawsuit and it showed that it was just the overcharge because they included the packaging weight in the price. There's no way that styrofoam weighs 2 pounds. Okay, it doesn't weigh 2 pounds. So that's obviously way more than just weighing it with the packaging. It's obviously not what's going on here. And if you actually add up the amount of money they made from this, billions of dollars, and they've only lost 45 million. So this is a win-win for them, profit-wise. And actually, that's not all they're doing. We're going to get into a number of other things that they're now trying to incorporate in some of their newer stores. You're not going to believe. And we're going to get into actually a ton of other stories. Some good news, some bad news. We got something from Gavin Newsom in California. We'll get into that. We're going to get into something pretty surprising with regards to federal workers versus you that you're not going to believe. And we're going to get into actually a ton of other stories, including also this Paula White's, which I talked about over on my other channel. First of all, I got to mention this book here, The Lost Ways, how your great-great-grandfather lived without electricity, how to build a cellar, do things around the house like they did in the good old days, hundreds of pages illustrated. You're going to definitely need that book before something happens. You never know, considering the fact that we're now going through the government and
that book actually would come in handy, wouldn't it?
Funding all this waste. Some of these people are not going to be very happy about losing their money. And they've already been talking about, I saw one representative saying this on X about war and it being a world one, all right? And she was, in a sense, hinting at that. And it really makes you wonder, you know, if we end up finding out all of this, of course, corruption and waste, will they try to, you know, go for that option? Because obviously they don't like their money being cut off, their fraud, you know, and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, it's wise to be prepared, and also you have natural disasters, whatever might come. You may have a time when you have extended period of time without electricity. It's wise to have that book just in case. Lots of good reviews, $37 for shipping. Get the printed version. Link is in the description. Of course, my website, Jared Videos. Tons of videos over there. Deep dives into a lot of different topics. Lots of free videos over there. Go check it out. Link is in the description for that as well. Let's get back to the video. So we have, of course, Apple of recent said that they're going to be doing $500 billion of business in America, bringing it back to America from China and other countries. Why are they doing that? It's actually quite a bit. It's very extensive. It's several states. $500 billion in the U.S. over the next 4 years. Teams and facilities to expand in Michigan, Texas, California, Arizona, Nevada, et cetera, as you can see there on the list. Plans include a new factory in Texas, doubling the U.S. Advanced Manufacturing Fund, a manufacturing academy, and accelerated investments in AI and silicon engineering. And this is not the only company doing this. You actually have tons of companies doing this, and this is not an extensive list here at all. And this is a result of what's happened over the last month under the new, of course, presidency. You have Ford, General Electric, Intel, Tesla, U.S. Steel, Nucor, and Komatsu. And I can name two more right now, just off the top of my head that I know about. John Deere and Stellantis, all moving manufacturing back to America. And we have steel manufacturing. Of course, a lot of that's usually done in India. One of the most richest men in the world is a guy that owns a steel company in India. So at any rate, so we're seeing tons of jobs coming back to America over the next 4 years. So this is some good news, obviously. And what's really interesting, though, is looking into this here. I mentioned this over my other channel.
I saw that, Diane. It's, yeah, the credit cards have been really maxed out, apparently.
160,000 civil service employees are millionaires. And guess what? This doubled in 2 years. From 2022, where it was only 77,000, to September 2024, where it was 155,000. So that is double, isn't it? That is over double. No, that's about double. That's almost exactly double. So that's double the amount in 2 years' time of millionaires working in the government. Now, considering all the things that have been discovered the last few weeks with USAID and all the other things, you might know a little bit of why they're all millionaires, perhaps, considering the fact that their wages are not enough to easily become millionaires per se, right? Although it is interesting because the former administration pretended as if there was no inflation. They kept telling us.
Hi, I'm Ben, and I'm here at Jayco to share an amazing opportunity to win this incredible Jayco Mercedes-Benz Ultimate.
Telling us there was no inflation, and even on the tax forms, left the brackets the same, which made you pay more taxes, pretending there's no inflation while they paid themselves more, and they're not actually generating actual money. So when you have a job in the GOV, you're actually a tax burden. When you're in the private sector, you have a job, you're actually making something of profit for our GDP. So they're actually a cost. We're actually funding millionaires while we're broke, is basically what's going on. It's a simple way to put it. And of course, looking at these facts or stats here, 2.7 million people currently work in the federal government, 400 billion in wages per year. We're about to see the largest mass layoff, of course, in U.S. history. And a lot of people are actually, this is actually popular. A lot of people are behind this, although they want you to think that's not the case.
Nearly 3/4 of Americans, look at that, think there should be a U.S. government agency focused on efficiency. 60%. And 60% think that DOGE specifically.
As you can see there on the screen, most people want the GOV to be less expensive and to be efficient and not to cost so much in taxes. And that's why we do have 5 different tax breaks that were announced back in January 2020. January 28 of 2020.
Shawnee, he's still got to go to the education department and DOGE that as well. He's got to go in and cut the budget there. So he hasn't even started on that yet. And the health system with RFK Jr. Once they get going, people are going to scream.
5 about a month ago. And we have, so we have the corporate tax cuts, we have personal tax cuts all coming. We just had the dividend check that they were talking about giving us when they find all this waste. They're going to give 20% back to us in a check. Kind of like those stimulus checks, except for not printed money, actual money that you worked for and paid them already. They're just refunding you in a sense. It's called a dividend. And it's already went through Congress. It's already gone through Congress, I think.
And it's funny how in 2 years they doubled their wealth, Shawnee.
Through the House. So this is obviously some good news. Although that doesn't mean anyone's not trying to stop them. I've seen a few different judges already try to stop them from accessing the data in these various departments in the GOV so that we can't go through it and just see all this waste, right? And that one's for the Department of Education. That was recently. And like I said, looking at these particular individuals here, this one just recently announced he's no longer going to run, Mitch McConnell. You can see their net worth. His is $100 million. He only makes $200K a year. You got Nancy here, $223K a year, and she has $200 million in the bank. It makes you kind of wonder where they're getting all that money.
Steve Bannon said Trump's going to go after them and use RICO laws. That's what he said. Hope he does.
Obviously, it's not from their paycheck. And of course, on top of that, we have Gavin Newsom with the new, well, actually not the new, the long-awaited rail system that he was supposedly making, where they spent $16 billion, and there is no rail system still. It was supposed to be done in 2020. We're in 2025. Nothing has been completed. $16 billion has been spent. Where did the money go? That's the question. Is this similar to the USAID? That's what some people are wondering. Now, I just showed you earlier about Apple making new jobs here and bringing a lot of their factories and stuff back to America, right? Well, interestingly, yesterday, something showed up on social media regarding the iPhone that if you use speech to text and you say, of course, the word racist, guess what shows up right before the word shows up on the screen? Your president's name shows up first, and then this word shows up second. And this was just recently discovered yesterday. Of course, this was reported to Apple, and Apple's like, "Whoa, this is a weird glitch. We're going to fix this glitch. We don't know how this glitch happened." So that's something, if you have an iPhone, you might see that if you want to try it out. A lot of people have already tried it and shown that it does indeed happen. I don't know if they've already updated it or not. Maybe your phone's been updated at this point. It's already been a day. At any rate, so there's that. But then we have also some other stories. We have here Kathleen Kennedy, who was head of Star Wars movies and Disney, and apparently Lucasfilm, I mean. And now apparently she's been fired. Of course, the reason why a lot of the most recent Star Wars movies have been bombs and failed is because of her. And a lot of people have been pointing it out actually over the last 5 years at least. And now she's finally stepping down. Of course, she was probably pushed out, but they're not making any money off their movies. They can't just keep having them make movies that make no money. Of recent with Marvel's, about the only movie that made any money was Deadpool, or was a success, a huge hit. Actually, there were a couple other ones, but almost all of them of recent, almost all of them, like 90% of the movies that Disney's put out have all been failures, including the newest one, Captain America, which appears to have already failed, and it's on its second week and already had a 68% drop. It's not doing good at all. Matter of fact, even the creator of Deadpool said that Kevin Feige should get off the mound. He's spent, referring to the guy who directed the Captain America movie. Obviously, they need to get people in there that are not what you would call woke, are having issues. And actually, in the case of this situation, though, from what I understand, this movie is only partially that way. It's not fully that way. They try to dial it back some because they realize a lot of people are rejecting it, but it still failed anyways. But anyway, so there's that. Then you have, of course, some crime-ridden area in New York City. We're talking about Brooklyn. Apparently, the McDonald's have started carding people. No longer can you just go in the door and get a McDonald's cheeseburger or whatever. You have to show your license, driver's license, to even get in the door now. It kind of reminds me of Walgreens in some of these cities where you have shampoo and deodorant behind lock and key on a glass door. Now you're going to get carded to get McDonald's. Yes. I'm sure, I know what people are going to say in the comment section is, I don't like McDonald's anyways, so it doesn't matter. There's going to be people saying that, of course. But also we have this story here. While a number of federal workers were becoming millionaires. You and I, overall in the private sector, have increased our debt. U.S. household debt shatters 18 trillion as delinquency rates surge, according to Federal Reserve.
I never knew that, boss.
A lot of people are obviously packing up on the debt on their credit card.
I didn't know your phone wasn't working properly, Voss.
And it's not looking good. Let's just put it that way. Obviously, now we have new jobs coming back to America. Several companies building factories and manufacturing and stuff. I think the wages are going to go up. And also on top of that, drilling for oil, backing the oil with petro oil contracts from America with the dollar. It's going to strengthen that as well. So it's going to turn out good. I think inflation is going to go down. Wages are going to go up. You also have government efficiency happening. So it's a good win overall. Then you have this story. I talked about this before. We have Paula White, and apparently she has brought Joni Lamb into D.C. She, of course, is mired in some sort of scandal. And it's kind of interesting because Paula White is now head of the Faith Department or something like that, Department of Faith or whatever our president appointed her as. And what's really interesting about it is she seems to be making a lot of bad decisions. And on top of that, I don't think she's exactly what you would call a great minister. Let's just put it that way. She's now bringing in a scandal into D.C. with this Joni Lamb. Of course, this is Daystar. It's a network, and they're mired in a scandal themselves. And interestingly, there was a prediction or prophecy about this happening. We have here a prophecy from 2021 from Mark, of course, Taylor, talking about wolves in sheep's clothing. And let me get down to the right area. Let's see if I can get on the screen a little bit. There we go. Spirit of God says another betrayal from the president's spiritual advisory board has taken place. Jezebel whispers, it's complete. We have the king's ear. I control who speaks to the king. No true prophets of the living God will ever reach him. Only my soothsayers will speak. The betrayer sits at the king's table. And he says that, and Mark says this is referring to Paula White. Spirit of God says the time is coming to hold the enemies.
I'd agree with that, 100%.
Of the living God, creator, accountable for the things against mankind. Repentance will save your soul.
Our topic today is Musk, dollar, and revolution. Now, let me just say something. You see that I use HalTurnRadioShow.com a lot. Here's the difference. Because you may be saying, well, why should I listen to Prophecy Club? Why should
Hey,
I
Phil, good to see you, mate.
HalTurnRadioShow.com? Get the same information. Yes, you'll get the same information. Matter of fact, even more. But the difference is, Hal's not a prophecy student.
Yes, I do.
That's putting it lightly. And so he's not going to be able to explain. As a matter of fact, I'm about to show you some things he surmises that is incorrect. Now, I'm not attacking him. I appreciate him. As a matter of fact, I think he's about my favorite side out there. But that's why you need the prophecy teacher to be able to help you and understand what the news is saying. Okay? That's the whole point of Prophecy Club, is to be able to help you know what the news is saying in light of what the prophets and what God is saying. Okay, let's get started. Headline, God mode. Access achieved to all USG agency computers. Now, you say, so what? Well, without a prophecy teacher explaining how this relates to Bible prophecy, you go, oh, okay, that sounds like a good idea. But you don't understand that's actually really big. And sad to say, it could be really, really bad. Let me explain. Algorithms created by the United States Department of
I said, hi, Phil, good to see you, but I forgot to press the arrow, Phil.
Government Efficiency, or DOGE, have finally achieved what they're calling God mode. Access to every executive branch agency spending system. Now, if Musk is a good guy, and if it is used properly and not abused, that's not good, right? Okay, now, here's where prophecy comes in. What if, as I've already said, I don't trust Musk. He could be the guy that introduces the mark of the beast. After all, he does have a payment system called PayPal. He does have Starlink satellites. They're going to be eventually having some 42,000 of them, low Earth orbiting satellites. We know he also owns X, used to be Twitter, and his goal is to make it the everything app. Well, okay, so big deal. If you understand we're coming to the mark of the beast, if you understand the time is coming that no one might buy or sell, save he had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name, having access to everything in the United States government. Oh, I see. So you're saying that he could link this together to form, drum roll, to form a mark of the beast system. It's good to watch the news, but you better be listening to what the prophets say too. All right, let's go on. So he says the algorithms are now inside the executive branch systems, actively tracing all transactions. Again, that sounds good, but can you also see that could be very, very, very bad? Tracing all transactions, cataloging all requisite information, creating output files for executive or presidential review. Now, that could be good. Let me show you how that can also be bad. Now, no expenditure of money can be hidden by vast networks of pass-throughs, as was possible for the past 50 years. No bank account destinations can be shielded anymore. If Trump is a good guy, and I think he is, and if Musk is a good guy, and so far he seems to be. But what if Musk has tricked Trump? What if the day is going to arrive when Trump agrees and all of a sudden Musk already has access to everything in the United States government, links it right in through X into Starlink, through the PayPal, the financial system, and all of a sudden, voila, we have the mark of the beast system. See what I'm saying? Let's go on. All the secrets about government money spending will be reviewed, and if the president chooses, but what if he doesn't exactly choose? What if it's access?
Phil, what did you detox off?
Sometime in the middle of the night when he didn't know it. Next morning, he doesn't know it's hooked in. And he goes to the president and says, I got a proposal for you. How about if we make this whole new financial system digital? Let's do away with the Federal Reserve, let's do away with the dollar, do away with the coins, do away with the paper. And how about if we have a global currency system that I run? This is Musk talking to Trump. Trump says, but you'd still report to me, right? Of course, of course, of course. Trump, not being a prophecy student, at least I've not heard of it and seen it, might say, oh, okay, that sounds like a good idea. See what I'm saying? Big problem. All the secrets about government money spending will be reviewed, and if the president chooses, revealed publicly, continued, or stopped. Let's go on. The masks used to hide what was going on have now all been penetrated by this level of access. Again, could be good, could be devastating. No court can stop executive review because that is the sole power of the executive per the U.S. Constitution, Article 2, Section 1, Clause 1. Fool judges issuing temporary restraining orders to prevent, quote, personally identifiable records, quote, to be withheld from, quote, Dodge employees are completely thwarted by the algorithms because the algorithm is not an employee Doge and the output is going directly to the executive, i.e. the president. Judges have no power. Now, see, this sounds good. And right now it is. But can it turn bad? Oh, yes, it can. In a New York second, as they say. Judges have no power at all to block the information from the executive branch agencies going directly to the executive, i.e. the president, because the president simply wants to see it. But Musk and his X, his spy satellites and low Earth orbiting satellites and his PayPal can also see it. You see it. Now, here's what Hal Turner says about it. Again, he's not a prophecy student, and he's about to reveal that to you. I was told something about this today, which completely shattered the entire paradigm. In other words, it shattered his picture of what's going on. But to the prophecy student, it doesn't surprise us. It says it's about the continuity of government. A single source, just one, but one who's in an amazing position to actually know, told me today, here it is, we are a hair's breadth away from implosion of the entire economy and the government. Hold it, hold it, hold it, wait a minute. Isn't that what we just said yesterday? Remember Brandon Biggs, this is the guy that saw that Trump was shot in the ear 3 months before it happened. He said that he saw a single event is going to crash the stock market and, of course, thus the dollar. Then here comes Trump along here and says, I'm going to go into Fort Knox and inspect the gold. So if he goes there and there is any sort of a report short of, oh, yes, everything we were expecting.
I see on somewhere on YouTube that Trump did get into Fort Knox and there's 400 tons of gold missing. So, yeah, I did see that. I don't know how true it is.
It's all in place. Now, what are the chances he's going to go in there and everything he's expecting is going to be the way it's supposed to be? My guess is 1 chance in 10. All of a sudden, Fort Knox doesn't have the gold as promised, or doesn't have access to it, or whatever, whatever the problem is. The stock market crashes. Bingo. Musk has access to all of our finances, the whole nation finances, through all the government finances. That's what I mean. Now, let's go on and see what he says. We're a hair away from implosion of the entire economy and the government. Could that be Fort Knox? Well, we don't know for certain, but it could be. This effort is about archiving the entire system. So, and if and when the implosion takes place, there may be at least a chance to recover. Okay. What if maybe it's not him going into Fort Knox? Maybe it's massive arrests starting, and maybe suitcase nukes. And as I was shown back in 2009, one of those suitcase nukes goes off at a regional bank, destroying all the records and their backups, throws America into a financial tailspin. What if Musk was sent by the devil, and all of this is part of the plan to take America and the dollar down, to bring us into a digital financial system of which no man can buy or sell, save you had a mark.
We're certainly in concerning times. We don't, wow.
Got a name of the beast and the number of his name. I tried to inquire further, but he said, I've already said too much. Now, let me back up and read that again. We're a hair's breadth away from implosion of the entire economy and the government. I'll read it again. We are a hair's breadth away from the implosion of the entire economy and the government. And there are caveats. Oh, look what they're doing. It's been said, don't look at what someone says, look at what they do. Okay, so look at what they're doing. I never perceived the entire Doge effort to have anything at all to do with COG, continuation of government. In other words, he's a secular guy, a former cop, so to speak. Prophecy student? No. You think he's following Prophecy Club? No, not a chance. Never heard of us. Couldn't care less. So he doesn't see the things that God has warned us of. Now, let's go on. Now, I must look at this whole Doge thing in context of gold. Being withdrawn from the Bank of England, that's 1. And shipped here to the U.S., that's 2. I've already showed you in the article last couple of days, several articles that massive amounts of gold is being shipped from England to New York, and you can rest assured it's probably being moved into Fort Knox every evening.
Yeah,
There's 2 things. Let me start again. Gold withdrawn from the Bank of England, shipped here to the United States, shortages of gold in South Korea, to the point where banks have said they're not selling any more gold or silver bars. Then we have Jamie Dimon of the JP Morgan Chase selling off some 233.7 233.7 million of his banking stock, liquidating his stock. Okay, there's an old saying that says, follow the money. So when you got not just one, but I'm about to read the second one, two of the wealthiest people on the planet, and they're selling their bank stock.
Yeah. What more do you need to know? Yeah.
Does that say something to you?
Yep.
Because that says something to me. Says to me like God's been speaking to us and warning us this is coming. But some of us want to think, oh, no, I mean, like our donations have fallen in the toilet. We don't need Prophecy Club no more. We got Trump. He's going to fix everything. Or is he? I think he wants to. But you have to understand, like they say, we've been ruling this planet for thousands of years and we'll destroy it rather than give it up. Now let's go on. So gold withdrawn from the Bank of England, shipped here to the United States. That's the second point. Gold in Korea and silver bars not being shipped anymore. And then the president of JP Morgan Chase selling massive amounts of his bank stock. Furthermore, Warren Buffett, one of the wealthiest people in the world, liquidating giant amounts of his Bank of America stock over the past 6 months. That's 5 things that's pointing to something really bad. And sorry to say, it's not done yet. Let's go on.
I think he's
Government
right.
using the National Defense Authorization Act to grab literally millions of pounds of canned and shelf-stable foods. What does Dana Coverstone say? Well, we've got, 7 or 8 different prophetic words. Lady goes into Walmart. She says, I'm not a prophet. I do a canning show. But I had this vision walking in Walmart, and there was no food. And there's like 7 or 8 of those. Could it be that one of the reasons there's no food is because the government got it all? And could it also be that the government knew what was coming? And the prophecy students know what's coming, but they just won't believe it. No, it's interesting, Stan. But how do we know this is really going to come? Bible tells us. In the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, let a thing be established. So when you have 2 people that don't even know each other, and they're both saying, God showed me that there's a food shortage coming. Oh, but we believe the newspapers a whole lot more than God's prophets. And that is a problem. Let's go on. So governments using the National Defense Authorization Act to grab literally millions of pounds of canned and shelf-stable foods to be trucked into this continuation of government bunkers all over the country every single night, 7 days a week for months now, dozens of tractor trailers per night in dozens of areas across the country being sent from food supply warehouses directly to the government storage facilities.
Wow.
Don't watch what they say, watch what they do. Now, here's a question for you. What this is saying, there's this terrible financial situation coming, and there's also a terrible food shortage coming. Okay? How do you get ready for the financial thing? I'm not an expert on this. I can tell you that I think it's a good idea you have some gold and silver. I think it's a better idea that you have food. Some people say 2 or 3 weeks of food. I'm going to say 2 or 3 years is not enough. As a matter of fact, not just food for you, but food for the whole neighborhood. So when the people come knocking at your door here, you got food, you can give them the food rather than have to try to fight them. Okay? Let's go on. More. Which is why I already talked about this a lot, so I don't have to cover it much. 800, 200 gold, I've talked about it. You can pause and read. Also, I've talked about this. If you need food, why spend $9,000, $10,000 to feed one person for a year? At Joseph Kitchen, you can do it for about $1,000 a person. Go check it out. Also, if you don't have one of these suitcase nukes, remember we got 89 different prophecies saying suitcase nukes going to go off? If you want your car to start when nobody else's does, you want your computers to work when no one else's does, use a promo code prophecy at empshield.com. Okay, further, Now, this is the proof. CEO of JP Morgan Chase dumps 233 million shares worth of stock. Next article, 110 billion has, not going to be, not could be, has been wiped out from the cryptocurrency things, all in the last 24 hours. Warning.
That's why I wouldn't get into cryptocurrency. I don't understand it enough.
What you need to know about the protest. All right, now, do we see something more about these protests? Protests what? We're not hearing much about protests. Oh, yeah, they're out there. I think it's the internal revolution already starting, because now it is time for us all to get concerned and pray. Let me refresh your memory. Dimitri Duden was told the fall of America will start with an internal revolution in America started by the communists. Now, I'm going to tell you what I think that is. This will be the first time I'm going to tell you, because I think it's the first time I've finally figured it out. I think Donald Trump getting in, all of his cabinet being put in place, and him cleaning up the filth, draining the swamp, is to make the devil and all of his servants extremely mad. They're going to start an internal revolution, which is the next sentence. Some of the people start fighting against the government. I'm about to show you that has started.
Yeah, that's true.
Some of the people start fighting against the government. Then the government is busy with internal problems. Well, right now, we got the Musk problems. We got the email problems. We got him taking money and cutting off here and there and cutting off there. Then we also are about to have a bunch of people protesting because all of the people, the migrants, been getting that free money, been getting those free hotels. That's all cut off. And it'll only be probably a couple of weeks to a month. And they're out protesting, just like Jeremiah 51 told us they're going to be doing. So the government's about to be busy with all kinds of internal problems. And it's not just immigrants. It's congressmen and bankers. It's all of these evil people. Right now, I think Pam Bondi is filing so many sealed indictments. Probably her whole staff is busy just filing sealed indictments.
Yeah.
Now, we did have like 457,000 as of about 2 weeks ago. My guess is that's probably skyrocketing. The government's going to be busy with internal problems. It's going to be busy with protesters. We want our entitlements. With immigrants, with congressmen being arrested. I mean, America's about to go into a chaos. Oh, Stan, that's never going to happen. Trump's in. Well, that's the problem. Trump is in. And I'm saying,
I reckon Trump's going to go after Hillary Clinton and all that.
It's going to fulfill prophecy.
And all them.
Try to imagine this. Okay, so Trump's in. He's doing his best to try to clean up America. But the problem is, too many Americans like their sin. They like their sleeping around. They're like they're stealing from the government. They like stabbing people in the back. They like the sins of the flesh. They don't like Trump. They don't like what Trump is doing. So consequently, they start protesting. The government is trying to solve the problems. Government is busy trying to solve the internal problems. Then from the ocean, Russia, Cuba, Nicaragua, Central America, Mexico, and 2 other countries he couldn't remember will attack. Well, who are the 2 other countries? My guess, North Korea, Venezuela, Iraq, Iran. We got a lot of enemies out there that like to take us down. But what about Central America? Okay, well, Stan, you know, there's not much down in Central America. Oh, yes, there is. The people in Honduras don't like Trump. People in Mexico don't like Trump. Now, Trump right now is talking about using the U.S. military to go down and take out the cartels. And the president of Mexico is going to change the Constitution to protect the cartels. I can see this prophecy in progress. Now, not next year. I don't think that the Russians are going to attack this year. My guess, I think we probably will see the fall of the dollar. My guess, I think we probably, now I'm just guessing, okay, God has not told me.
Yeah.
My guess is probably we will see suitcase nukes this year. I'm very happy.
He's certainly got Adam Schiff, Diane. I think he's got Comey as well. So hopefully he'll go after more.
to think that our prayers may have got to where we're not going to split Israel, give the Palestinians a state. I don't know if Trump can pull that all off about turning Gaza into a Middle East Riviera. I would like to think that could happen. And I think it's real sad that none of the other Muslim countries want any of the Palestinians. I mean, they're bad people. And Israel shouldn't get stuck with them. Israel shouldn't have to take care of them. Shut up, Stan. Keep your mouth shut. Don't give them your opinion. Okay, so move on. Because what I would say would not be real popular. I think it'd be popular with you, but it would not be popular with a lot of people.
Yeah.
All right, let's go on. Now, I'm not going to read all this. We've covered this many times. This is back in 2010 when he had the vision. He saw the finances fall because the dollar was worthless as leaves blowing in a tree, which is why I have the video going behind me. It is going right, yeah. He also saw New Madrid fall, but he said, they've divided my land, now I divide their land. So if we don't divide Israel, I want to think we get past that New Madrid fault. But then we have give us our entitlements. Who would be saying give us our entitlements? Well, probably the immigrant.
The Democrats are already doing that. They're singing in the street, bring back our entitlements. So he was right about that.
They'll lift up a shout against thee. Remember, I read that scripture. Also, all of the people that just got laid off, they'll, instead of entitlements, they might say, give me my job back. Yeah, but you weren't working. Well, that had nothing to do with it.
I think he's right here.
Yeah. What about all the people that used to be on welfare? Even Dmitry Duduman said he thought that what would start the internal revolution would be something like they cut off welfare. How right he was. The devaluing of the dollar caused major rioting in the streets. The devaluing of the dollar could take place next week. Trump walks into Fort Knox, and if he gets any kind of a report short of, yep, it's good, all the gold's there, everything's fine. Any report short of that, and that dollar and that stock market could crash hard and fast. Now, do you want to believe me?
But the dollar's not connected to the gold. The dollar's under the petro system. It's not under gold. So I don't understand what he's saying here.
Don't believe me? Believe what God has spoken to the prophets. How do we know it's the prophets? In the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, let a thing be established. He went on to say that he had an audible voice speak to him and say, silver, not gold, but silver would skyrocket far more than gold. I've read this lots of times. If you want to read it, you can read it again. Here's miracles return to the church. This is important. I talked about this. This is back in 2020. This is the guy that saw Trump shot 3 months before it happened. And this is what he saw was that there would be one event that caused everything, the stock market, to crash. But this is Coverstone. And the angel that came to him showed him a house divided against itself shall not stand. We're a house divided. The Democrats say he's not my president. They are picking up bullhorns. They are protesting. For example, let me show you one of them.
There is no law and there is no order and there are no consequences. Nobody is held to account.
The end result of the fraud and abuse that has been discovered already.
Voters in West Bend expressing their frustrations today with their congressman, Republican Scott Fitzgerald.
Many are upset about cuts being made by the Trump administration and the Department of Government Efficiency, led by Elon Musk.
Some who spoke out say what's happening with the federal government is unacceptable. Our chief political reporter, Charles Benson, was the only local TV reporter at this event. He joins us live now in studio with some of what he saw there, Charles.
Yeah, President Trump has been on the job exactly 1 month today, and at least one Republican congressman is getting pushback in his district from voters who are not supportive of Trump's actions and executive orders so far. About 100 people showed up for a listening session called by Republican Scott Fitzgerald. Many in the room raised concerns about Elon Musk and his access and efforts to cut government programs and budgets. Fitzgerald was asked multiple times about
Look at that imbecile help Ukraine. What a fool.
transparency and congressional oversight.
We cannot just sit back and wait. Right. Things are happening at warp speed, illegal things that are having consequences right now. And we need you. Yeah.
Elon Musk is ignoring a bunch of financial stuff. He is in the Treasury. He is trying to get access to our tax returns. Are you going to subpoena him at some point? Or after you're done with the budget or whatever, are you willing to use your subpoena power to say, Musk, come in here, stand in front of Congress.
You can't even put a sentence together.
And answer some hard questions. That is how you can hold him to account.
Congressman Fitzgerald tells me he hears from voters about security concerns with Musk's access to a lot of budget and financial information, but he supports the Trump administration's efforts with DOJ to root out what he sees as fraud and waste. Fitzgerald says there will be oversight by Congress.
Certainly the discussion in and around DOJ and with the probationary moves that have already been done, they're going to have to be scrutinized at some point by the Ways and Means Committee, where the expenditures would be made, and by the other standing committees. We're not in that position right now.
And so this session went for about an hour.
Was anybody there speaking in support of the Trump administration and Elon Musk?
So if there were, no one spoke up at the event in support of Trump's efforts. It was open to the public, and this listening session was on Fitzgerald's webpage. The Washington County Democratic Party also encouraged people to attend with signs.
We've got a new sponsor. It's SAT123.
The all-new Deliver 7 from just $42,490 drive away for ABN holders. LDB, bring it on.
What if modern UFO or UAP phenomenon isn't modern at all?
Yeah, Phil, Nixon took it off the gold standard, didn't he? It's not, the American dollar is not related to the gold you got.
Today, we're going to look at ancient accounts of these things from Indian epics to the Bible itself in order to determine what these things are, what they want, and what can we expect from them going forward. For context, if you're new to my content, I am a Christian and I view other religions just as the Bible describes them. They're false deceptions taught by fallen angels and demons. And it's my hope that by bringing this to light, anyone caught under the spell of these false religions can find freedom and salvation in Jesus Christ. Amen. So let's begin with ancient Indian texts. And while we're reading through these, think about modern UFO/UAP phenomena and ask yourself, are these descriptions very much different or are they eerily similar? Welcome to the Sharpening Report. I am your host, Josh Peck. If you haven't had a chance to do so already, make sure you subscribe, click the bell to turn on all notifications, put a like on this video, leave us a comment, all that stuff. That really helps. That really helps support what we do here, helps the algorithm at YouTube, so more people can view this video and get this information. So please help share it around, help support what we do. Okay, so let's start with the Mahabharata. Now, the Mahabharata is an ancient Sanskrit epic concerning the history of India. It's estimated 1.8 million words, and it's perhaps most noted for the details it contains about the Kurukshetra War. And we can find descriptions of chariots, both terrestrial and celestial, or perhaps extra-dimensional. In other words, of men and gods. So in the Mahabharata, we find a description of a chariot called the Pushpaka. The Sanskrit word Pushpaka has a variety of meanings. So it can mean a kind of serpent. It can mean of a mountain. It can mean of the self-moving aerial car of Kubera, also Vimana. It was carried off by the demon Ravana. and constantly used by him till he was slain by Ramachandra, who then employed the car to transport himself.
Yeah, I don't know why, but I don't know why I know this, but Nixon took it off the gold standard in 72. Pretty sure that's right.
And Siddha back to Ayodhya. So there's other definitions as well, but these three are more than enough to suit our purposes here. I'll also mention too that if you want the show notes for all of the videos that we do where it's applicable, sometimes I don't have it for interviews, but for something like this, if you want all the show notes where you have all this information in PDF format, or just online, there's a couple different ways to do it. You can go become a member at dailyrenegade.com, and there you'll get access to this full video, plus you'll get the show notes that you can download as a PDF. Or if you want access to the show notes online and you also want to listen to the audio only podcast version of this, the full content, then you can go to joshpeck.substack.com and become a member there. It's only $5 a month or $50 a year. If you can do it, do the $50 a year because it's a little cheaper in the long run. But there, you'll also get all the show notes in blog format, plus all of my other blogs, plus the audio-only podcast version of this episode and everything else we do. So I just wanted to make quick mention of that. So in these texts, we learn of the Pushpaka's ability for air travel. So it says, quote, and he rode on that beautiful and sky-ranging chariot called the Pushpaka that was capable of going everywhere at the will of the rider, end quote. We also learn of the origins of the Pushpaka. It says, and the Lord of Treasures sat on that excellent seat, the elegant Pushpaka constructed by Vishwakarma, painted with diverse colors. Now, the interesting thing is that Vishwakarma, sometimes written as Vishvakarman, is the deity of craftsmen and architects. So, in essence, he could be considered as the lower G god of technology. But in the Vedas, he is also seen as the ultimate creative force, later developed as Brahman. He's also sometimes referred to as the principal architect of the universe. That probably sounds familiar if you know anything about like Freemasonry and that kind of stuff. They have similar terms. Now, another interesting description is found in the Mahabharata concerning the Pushpaka. It says, and the son of Raghu then, having worshipped that Pushpaka chariot, joyfully gave it back unto Vaisravana. So we learn that the Pushpaka was something that was considered as worthy of worship. Not only was the god Vishwakarma considered a deity, but also was his creation of the Pushpaka airship. Now, there's a common tradition that teaches that the serpent of the Garden of Eden was the one responsible for the development of ancient and modern technology, at least initially. And then later on, we have stuff like the Watchers and Enoch and things like that. But this view from Genesis, it stems from certain verses from the 3rd chapter of the book of Genesis.
So have you seen that black and white movie about the Rothschilds? It's like in the 1700s, and it's when they open their banks up. It's an old black and white film. It's pretty interesting.
Genesis 3:17 through 19 says, and unto Adam he said, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, thou shalt not eat of it. Cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. Thorns also and thistles shall bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread till thou return unto the ground, for out of it wast thou taken, for dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return. We also get Genesis 3:23, which says, therefore the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. Now, the common interpretation of verse 19, specifically where it says, in the sweat of thy face thou shalt eat bread, is that Adam would now have to work to prepare his own food. No longer would it be readily available as it was in the Garden of Eden. If Adam wanted bread, he would now have to make it himself. Also, verse 23 states that they had to till the ground. Well, since tilling ground requires tools and innovation, and since the serpent was the one who tempted them into this position, it's commonly believed that the development of technology resulted from the influence of the serpent. You know, no one gets into full-time ministry to make money. At least no one should. given that, Daily Renegade accepts donations from.
See, Diane, that's why I don't go anywhere near crypto. I wouldn't know if I'm being ripped off. So if I can't even know that, I wouldn't be investing.
But those who care to help keep us going. Now, because Daily Renegade does not want to be told by the government what we can and can't say, we're not 501c3. So your donations are not tax deductible, but that's not why you're giving anyway, to get something back for yourself. Speaking of which, we here are never going to promise that if you donate, God will reward you with even more financial success. We're not about making promises for God here. But what I can promise is your donations are very much appreciated and help the continuation of everything we do here at Daily Renegade to reach the world with the truth of the Bible. Also, as many of you know, my son Nathan has had some very serious medical issues that we are treating with good, all natural and holistic remedies. But of course, those are very expensive and are not covered by insurance. So your donations help go towards his health care as well. If you can't afford to donate, you can always donate your time in prayer, which is far more valuable anyway. Let's be serious. So pray for our wisdom, pray for God's guidance for us, and that we never lose focus on what's.
See, that's how you ask for donations. You give Paul a good lesson on that.
Really important, which is using Daily Renegade as a light of truth that the world so desperately needs right now, especially in these times. As always, thank you so much for your generosity, and I pray God blesses you greatly.
Good on you, Joe.
And if this is to be taken as literal truth, then we end up with a very different picture of what's going on with Vishwakarma and the Pushpaka. Now, in Forbidden Secrets of the Labyrinth, author Mark Flynn talks about how identities can be assigned to mythological characters to see them from a biblical perspective. If ancient mythology is nothing more than a deceptive retelling of the truth from the mouth of the serpent and his fallen followers, then we can see how assigning identities can be useful in reinterpreting these accounts. If we're to believe that there is an ancient evil in the world who is trying to subvert the truth in order to fulfill his own goals, we can expect certain reinterpretations of truth to be prevalent. And of course, we see that in all other religions. So we can look at this in a couple different ways. Vishwakarma could represent Yahweh, but from the view of the serpent. Remember, the serpent is a liar. Satan's going to lie about God. So Vishwakarma could represent Yahweh from the view of the serpent. The Pushpaka could represent the serpent himself. This could help explain the alternate definition of serpent for Pushpaka. Vishwakarma constructed the Pushpaka just as Yahweh created the serpent. However, in the Mahabharata, the Pushpaka was something that was deserving of worship, just as the serpent seems to believe about himself. It's also possible that the serpent is identifying himself with Vishwakarma himself. If the serpent is setting himself up to be the ultimate creator and deity of architects, the Pushpaka could be a representation of the technology that he brought into the world. Technology being a creation of the serpent, or at the very least, a result of the actions of the serpent, would represent the cunning and wisdom that he has. If the serpent is as self-absorbed as the Bible seems to portray, then it would be plausible that he would desire worship not only for himself, but for his attributes as well. Now, setting aside the idea of assigning identities, the story of the Pushpaka brings up some interesting questions. Assuming it was the serpent who brought technology into the world, would this not mean that technology itself has extra-dimensional origins? With the influence of the serpent and other extra-dimensional beings, how quickly did that technology progress in the ancient past? Might ancient man have had access to, or at least encounters with, higher forms of technology than that which is available even today? Well, perhaps one of the most interesting examples of possible ancient technology from ancient Sanskrit texts is that of Vimanas. Vimanas are mentioned in the Mahabharata. However, in a text called the Bhagavata Purana, they're more common. The Bhagavata Purana primarily focuses on Krishna, the complete incarnation of Lord Vishnu, the Hindu god. And we learn of the Vimanas' capability for flight early on in the Bhagavata Purana. So this is what it says. As Dundakari spoke, a brilliant Vimana flew down from the sky, soft as the petals of a rose. In it were many eternal dwellers in Vishnu's realm. Vaikuntha Dudukari embraced his brother Gokarna and climbed into the ship of the sky. So that's interesting. The Vimana, as described, is a true extra-dimensional vehicle. Doesn't that sound similar to the UFO UAP phenomenon today?
Mhm.
It's described as flying, but also as carrying the eternal dwellers from Vishnu's realm. Now, again, from a biblical Christian perspective, these things would be demons and fallen angels. But we also learned that this vehicle had physicality to it, since Dudukari was able to physically climb inside. So, as described, this account is not a dream or a vision. It's a description of a personal interaction with an extra-dimensional vehicle. And in that way, if you just take the broad strokes, it's very similar to what people encounter today, like during alien abductions and things like that, which it supports the view that all this alien stuff is demonic in nature. Now, to further support the extra-dimensional properties of these vehicles, there's another description of the Vimana's capabilities. It says, quote, "The Vimana flashed away into heaven beyond the stars like a thought, leaving a golden trail in the sky which dissolved in a few moments and vanished above the perfect silence that had fallen on the gathering of men on the earth below." So we see that the Vimana was not only a flying machine of sorts, but that it was able to traverse beyond the stars and into heaven. Now, these vehicles were also reported as disc-shaped and having faster than light travel, by far a physical impossibility, but something that could be possible if it was from extra-dimensional origins. Here's another one. "I saw devas fly down to the earth in their mystic Vimanas, which are swifter than light. Wondrous Alaka, city of the king of the Yakshas and Guyakas, lord of the nine treasures, one of the Lokapalas, the masters of the earth, fairly swarms with Vimanas, which look like immense flying jewels, cut like faceted discs, which fly more quickly than light or time," end quote. Now, that really sounds like a UFO, doesn't it? The fact that the Vimanas are described as disc-shaped flying jewels, that's really intriguing when compared to modern-day UFO reports. The reference to them being able to fly faster than light or time is especially interesting. This seems to indicate faster than light travel and possibly even time travel. In either case, these capabilities would be more plausible from an extra-dimensional device rather than extraterrestrial, like from another planet, just due to the physical laws of nature. Now, we also learned that these were not only vehicles, but they were actually the palaces of extra-dimensional beings.
Shawnee, I wouldn't mind playing that about the chemtrails, but I'm pretty sure I'll get a community strike. They don't get a community strike because they got millions of followers, but I'm pretty sure I would.
It says, quote, "With his yogic powers, Kardama created a fabulous Vimana. It was a flying palace. It was surrounded by fine gardens set with sparkling lakes, and the palace itself was lavished with the 9 precious stones encrusting the columns that supported the magical edifice."
Wow.
Now, this flying palace is described as containing fine gardens set with sparkling lakes. This seems to be describing water and plant life. Now, keeping in mind that Vimanas are described as originating from a higher dimension, we could compare this to something like the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden most likely contained extra-dimensional plant life as well. And I've talked about this in an earlier video, but that it's possible.
That's a fair equation. I'll agree with him on that.
That the Garden of Eden was put somewhere extra-dimensionally to keep it away from Adam and Eve. And I talked about that in a previous video. But if you are interested in this topic, all of this research comes from my book, Cherubim Chariots, which you can get right now at prophecywatchers.com. That's the best place to get it. But anyway, from this, we can see that the higher dimensions are not only populated with intelligent life, but also non-intelligent life such as plants. Now, we can read of a biblically familiar ritual that took place before entering the Vimana. Kardama said to her, "Go, my love, and bathe in the Bindasaras before we enter the Vimana." Now, that's reminiscent of the rituals the ancient Levitical priest had to perform before being allowed in the presence of Yahweh, which equates to modern-day baptism in Christianity. Now, and again, for everything that God has, Satan has an inferior counterpart, an inferior, evil, twisted counterpart. If God has a temple, Satan's going to want one. If God has a ritual before entering in, Satan's going to want his version of that. And we see that all over. Now, there are many more descriptions of Vimanas found all throughout the Bhagavata Purana. But to fully appreciate the depth and vast amount of information, one would have to look at the entire text in full. However, the goal here is not for an exhaustive study of Vimanas, extremely interesting though they are. Our goal here is to establish the existence of ancient texts that contain accounts of personal encounters with extra-dimensional entities and vehicles. And as we'll see in a moment, Vimanas are just one description of such vehicles. In fact, we even see something with some similarities, but also stark differences in the Old Testament. Now, there's a really interesting theory that's becoming more popular in the study of UFOs and extra-dimensional craft. And this theory states that UFOs that people see today, that they're not mechanical at all, but are actually biological. And this theory sees UFOs as actual living biological entities. So what we see is, metallic craft is nothing more than a body for the consciousness or the spirit inside. Hey,
and guys, you remember that drone that got caught in a tree and the guy filmed it and you could see something moving inside? That's what he's talking about.
Concerning the economically unstable times that we live in, it is a great idea to convert some of your savings into real money. Now, there is a big difference between real money and what we call money, which is actually currency. So our dollar is currency, which fluctuates. Real money, like silver, is a store of value over time. The best way to think of it is like this. If you had saved $1,000 in cash back in the late 60s, the late 19... The idea is that a race of super intelligent extraterrestrials have found a way to meld living material with non-living physical components, and the theory that that states that it is all biological, however, is less recognized as a viable explanation. But the idea that an extra-dimensional craft is alive is really not a new concept at all. In the Bible, the prophet Ezekiel describes the chariot of the throne of God as being made of living entities. And this is even spoken about in the book of Psalms. Psalm 18:10 says, "And he rode upon a cherub and did fly, yea, he did fly upon the wings of the wind." Now, of course, the UFOs that are commonly reported really look nothing like what Ezekiel reported. There are sometimes that there are some similarities, but by and large, it's different. But there is one aspect of this heavenly chariot that Ezekiel saw that does.
Shawnee, you know how that Ezekiel, the wheel within a wheel? I've seen one of them drone UFOs be exactly that. It looked exactly like Ezekiel's wheel, and the wheel in the middle, yeah, it was just like that. It was really crazy.
Holds a certain resemblance and might provide more information as to the biological and extra-dimensional nature of certain UFOs. So Ezekiel reports in Ezekiel 1:15 through 17. And just to set the scene, if you're not familiar, just Ezekiel sees this amazing vision. He sees this. It's like the throne of God, but it looks very odd, and it looks like it's controlled by like angels and stuff. But going into this part of it's in the first chapter of Ezekiel, and I have a lot of videos on it if you want to go back and check those out. I don't want to get into all of it here, but I do want to focus on this one part from Ezekiel 1:15 through 17, which says, "Now as I beheld the living creatures, behold, one wheel upon the earth by the living creatures with his four faces. The appearance of the wheels and their work was like unto the color of a beryl. And they four had one likeness, and their appearance and their work was as it were a wheel in the middle of a wheel. Now, when they went upon their four sides, and they turned not when they went." So the word wheels used here was translated from the Hebrew word ophan, which is where we get the plural ophanim. Now, by itself, the Hebrew word ophanim simply means wheels and doesn't denote anything necessarily extraordinary. Many times this word is used for regular earthly wheels, such as those found on normal human-made chariots. This word was also used to describe the wheels of the 10 bases beneath the lavers in Solomon's temple. However, taken in the context of this passage, Ezekiel is describing something quite different than earthly man-made wheels. He's describing an actual extra-dimensional being. Now, upon first read of the passage, it would seem that these wheels were a part of the living construct that makes up God's chariot. In some ways, this is true, but they're not connected physically. Verse 15 tells us that the wheels were by the living creatures, not connected to them. Now, while not connected physically, they may have been connected in another way, more supernatural. So, giving further description of these wheels, or ophanim, Ezekiel continues in Ezekiel 1:18. As for their rings, they were so high that they were dreadful, and their rings were full of eyes round about them four. So the word rings comes from the Hebrew word gab and means rim of a wheel. Ezekiel was describing the rims of these wheels, even saying that they were full of eyes. This is an interpretation. There is an interpretation of this that states the wheels were most likely windows of a craft. At first, that might seem plausible. After all, Ezekiel was trying to describe something he's never seen before and would use the best terms he could to describe it.
Oh, well, it's good to see you.
Because this view is promulgated a lot in Ancient Aliens and stuff like that. There's a big problem with it. The problem with it is if Ezekiel was trying to describe windows, he could have just as easily used the Hebrew word shalom, which means window. He had words for window. Ezekiel had access to far simpler and more descriptive Hebrew words that he could have used if he was trying to describe something other than what is presented in the text. This is what leads me to believe when Ezekiel writes eyes, he literally means eyes. He's not trying to say windows. So next, from Ezekiel 1:19 through 21, Ezekiel writes, "And when the living creatures went, the wheels went by them. And when the living creatures were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up. Whithersoever the spirit was to go, they went. Thither was of the living creature was in the wheels." That last part is really interesting. This passage is what tells us the true nature of the ophanim. These were not merely inanimate wheels, they were actually alive. And we know this because Ezekiel tells us the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. The wheels themselves acted as a type of body for the spirits. The wheels were not just an extra-dimensional mechanical construct. The wheels actually had life in them. There are ancient texts that actually refer to the ophanim as a specific class of angel. In the book of Enoch can be found one of those references. It says, "And he will summon all the host of the heavens and all the holy ones above and the host of God, the cherubic, seraphim."
Diane, Trump's going after the IRS too, isn't he?
"And ophanim, and all the angels of power and all the angels of principalities and the elect one and the other powers on the earth and over the water. On that day shall raise one voice and bless and glorify and exalt in the spirit of faith and in the spirit of wisdom and in the spirit of patience and in the spirit of mercy and in the spirit of judgment and of peace and in the spirit of goodness, and shall all say with one voice, Blessed is he, and may the name of the Lord of spirits be blessed forever and ever." Now, the idea of the ophanim being an actual class of angel is not new or an altogether uncommon idea. The Sephardic Jewish philosopher and astronomer Maimonides wrote that the ophanim are the second class in the hierarchy of angels. Pseudo-Dionysius in the 4th or 5th century wrote that the ophanim were among the first sphere of angelic hierarchy. We can see these wheels in other books of the Bible as well. Daniel 7:9 says, "I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire." It's Daniel 7:9. Now, one thing is for sure, if the Ophanim are indeed a class of angel all their own, then heaven and its inhabitants are far stranger than we are traditionally led to believe. And this is just one of many ways that shows how fascinating the study of extra-dimensional beings and vehicles can be. This also brings up some interesting questions concerning the fallen angels mentioned in the Bible. Is it possible different angels from different classes fell? Could there have been a rebellious group of Ophanim that fell? And could this explain at least some of the modern UFO sightings we see today? Is it possible that certain UFOs might actually be alive? Well, it has been reported that Ben Rich, the director of Lockheed's Skunk Works from 1975 to 1991, admitted that not only are UFOs real, but that they are powered by a type of ESP. If this is true, then perhaps this is an example of man's crude attempt of understanding something spiritual through a scientific lens. Imagine if we saw today what Ezekiel saw in the ancient past. Imagine if we saw the cherubim move wheels without touching them. Would we not assume it was by some form of ESP? And when I say we, I mean the world broadly, not us as Christians. We would probably assume it's something spiritual, but the world broadly, wouldn't they, if they saw something like that, which many people have, wouldn't they assume it's some kind of ESP? Now, instead of thinking of it as a power from the mind, maybe we should be thinking of it as a power from the spirit. After all, Ezekiel stated that the spirits of the cherubim were in the wheels. Wherever the spirit went, the wheels went. So perhaps we are seeing the same sort of thing in some of the modern sightings of UFOs. And maybe the extra-dimensional pilot is actually controlling the vehicle, maybe not by its mind, but more by its spirit. And maybe the spirit itself is the pilot and the vehicle is the body. So maybe like a fallen version of what Ezekiel saw, the things that we typically recognize or view as extraterrestrial craft or UFOs, UAPs, whatever we want to call them, maybe that's actually, maybe some of them, but maybe they're actually living extra-dimensional beings. Now, given that context, let's look back to the ancient people that witnessed the Vimanas and what they were taught to believe by their deceptive fallen angel rulers. What was the point of all this? So these things come down in these Vimana craft, and they teach, well, what were these beings? Who were these beings? What were they teaching? And why would fallen angels want to do this to nations all around the world? Well, let's get into all that. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed the first half of this episode of the Sharpening Report. You know, if you are a Bible-believing Christian who opposes the kingdom of darkness trying to run the world right now, then you are a renegade to the satanic system. We here at Daily Renegade wear that badge proudly. So, if you're a renegade as well.
Okay, that was the end of that one. I think I had one more, and I didn't want to play that. Yeah, this will do it.
We know vitamins can support health and well-being, but did you know only a fraction of them are absorbed into your...
Hey everybody, Josh Peck here. Well, we got a lot to talk about. Big, possibly huge prophetic news day. Is it possible, according to the prophecy of
Okay, this is 6 days old, guys.
The popes, that Pope Francis might not actually be the final pope, but rather the next one will? And how would this work, and what would this mean for the very near future should Pope Francis not survive his recent hospital visit? Well, don't worry if this is all brand new to you, if you've never heard of the prophecy of the popes, or if you don't know anything about this. Don't worry, we're going to break it all down, and it is very prophetically significant. Before we jump in, if you haven't had a chance, if you're viewing this on YouTube or Rumble, make sure you follow us, make sure you subscribe to this channel, click the bell to turn on all notifications. I've noticed in my analytics about half of my viewers aren't subscribed. And I know some of that is because YouTube does unsubscribe people sometimes. Don't know why they do it, but they do. So just make sure you click the bell and turn on all notifications so you know when a new video comes up. Okay, so if you haven't heard, Gateway Pundit recently reported on Pope Francis's current medical issues. And I'm going to go through this, and then we're going to get into the prophecy of the Pope stuff. But Pope Francis, who is now 88 years old and hospitalized, is grappling with worsening health as he fights double pneumonia. I want to mention too, real quick, if you want the show notes for this video and all the other videos that we do, I do make those available at dailyrenegade.com as a downloadable PDF. I also make that available on my Substack, joshpeck.substack.com. And really the best way is to just get a subscription to the both, and you have everything. Not only on the Substack, not only do you have the show notes, excuse me, but you also get audio-only podcasts. So if you're driving in your car and you don't want to watch something, or if you're doing some household chores or just hanging out and you don't actually want to watch something, you just want to listen, joshpeck.substack.com is the place to go. Okay, so long a target of conservative criticism for pushing the Catholic Church towards left-leaning political issues and causes instead of upholding tradition and moral values, Francis has been battling a severe respiratory infection for over a week now, and that condition has now escalated into double pneumonia, which is an aggressive illness inflaming both lungs and can be extremely serious. A Vatican update confirmed that a chest CAT scan performed on Tuesday uncovered the onset of double pneumonia. So the update noted, quote, polymicrobial infection, which has arisen in the context of bronchiectasis and asthmatic bronchitis, and has required the use of corticosteroid and antibiotics, makes the therapeutic treatment more complex, end quote. So on Wednesday night, the Vatican shared a new update on its website reporting that Pope Francis is in stable condition and that blood tests indicate a minor improvement. Although, as we'll see in a minute, that's not as good of news as it sounds initially. But they said, quote, the Holy Father's clinical condition is stationary. The blood tests evaluated by the medical staff show a slight improvement, particularly in the inflammatory indices. After breakfast, the Pope read some newspapers and then went about his work with his closest collaborators. Before lunch, he received the Eucharist. In the afternoon, he received a visit from Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, with whom he spent 20 minutes in private, end quote. But things later seemed to take a turn for the worse. So RadarOnline.com reported that the 88-year-old Pope has allegedly told his aides that he won't survive and is preparing for death as he fights pneumonia in the hospital. Two insiders who spoke with Politico say that the Pope has been deeply upset after being unable to give his customary Sunday Angelus sermon, a responsibility he's almost never skipped during his time as pontiff. Politico stated, quote, on February 6th, before he was hospitalized, he extended the term of the Italian Cardinal Giovanni Battista Re as Dean of the College of Cardinals, a role that will oversee some preparations for a potential conclave, the secretive gathering that determines the selection of a new pope. The move, which controversially sidestepped a scheduled vote on the next dean by top cardinals, was intended to ensure that the process plays out according to Francis's wishes, the people said. Ray, a long-time Vatican operator, is too old to participate in the conclave himself. Nevertheless, he will be a pivotal figure in the behind-closed-doors discussions that often take place before the conclave. That Francis selected him as dean instead of a younger candidate suggests he wanted to keep a friendly face in the role who would defend his legacy, said one of the people. On Saturday, the pontiff also sped up his unprecedented reformist move to appoint a nun, Sister Raffaella Petrini, as the next and first woman governor of Vatican City, announcing that Petrini's term would begin on March 1st. That date was earlier than some expected and triggered unease about his health among allies, according to one high-ranking church official. However, it might also have been a coincidence. The current governor, Cardinal Fernando Vergez Alzaga, will turn 80 that day, making him ineligible for the role. Even if Francis survives his latest illness, observers see this as a likely turning point as Francis shifts focus from making headway on reform to locking it in. He may, quote, this is what one Vatican official says, quote, he may not die now, but of course he eventually will. We all die, and he's an 88-year-old man with lung problems, end quote. So with that, that is the recent news on his health, which has had a lot of people wondering about the prophecy of the Pope. So I wanted to go into that because the question comes up, if Pope Francis does not survive, where does that lead us with the prophecy
Exactly.
of the popes? Well, for anybody who's not familiar with it, the prophecy of the popes is an almost 900-year-old collection of 112 brief, mysterious Latin phrases that supposedly forecast the sequence of Catholic popes, beginning with Celestine II, excuse me, and concluding with the 112th pope known as Peter the Roman. Now, apparently, it's been completely accurate so far. And according to the prophecy, this final pope's reign is said to lead up to the destruction of Rome. Pope Benedict, who passed away not long ago, was number 111 on this list. And that leaves Pope Francis, if his election was legitimate. And I'll get into why I say that shortly. But that would leave Pope Francis.
Okay, so that's how they're going to get around it. I don't think that's going to work, mate.
As number 112, the last in the lineup. Again, if his election was legitimate. Now, a lot of this stuff comes from the great work of Tom Horn with Petrus Romanus that he co-authored with Chris Putnam. And I really wanted to cover this because Tom's not here to be able to cover it himself. He passed away shortly. Chris Putnam isn't here either. He passed away a few years ago. And I've co-authored stuff with Tom Horn as well, most notably Apollyon or Abaddon Ascending, excuse me, which I do not believe is in print anymore. But regardless, I wanted to cover this. Tom was a really good friend of mine, and he was absolutely brilliant. We were really close. And so, you know, since he's not here, I figured I'd cover it. So this is so I just wanted to give credit where credit's due. Tom Horn is the one that really pioneered all of this research. But here's the line in the prophecy of the popes that's assigned to the 112th, the last pope. It says, quote, in the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church, there will sit Peter the Roman, who will pasture his sheep in many tribulations. And when these things are finished, the city of 7 hills, i.e. Rome, will be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge his people, the end. End quote. So some Catholics believe that the final pope on, the person that did this, did this whole prophecy was named Saint Malachi. But again, so far, as far as it seems, every single one has been accurate. Every single one of these little lines about each pope. But some Catholics believe.
And them 3 kids in Fatima that saw the UFO up in the air in 1917, they're the same.
That the final pope on St. Malachi's.
Like they said that this is the final pope, and this, like she wrote a letter to the Vatican. She ended up becoming a nun. I forget her name, but she's one of the kids from Fatima, and she said this pope is going to be the last pope. She said it
list
too.
signals the start of a great apostasy and a subsequent great tribulation, paving the way for apocalyptic events. And that's a view that plenty of non-Catholics might follow along with as well. You know, I'm a Protestant, but I pay attention to this stuff. If it's true, then we want to know it. You know, no one gets into full-time ministry to make money. At least no one should. Given that, Daily Renegade accepts donations from those who care to help keep us going. Now, because Daily Renegade does not want to be told by the government what we can and can't say, we're not 501c3. So your donations are not tax deductible, but that's not why you're giving anyway, to get some. World's religious groups toward supporting a political figure called the Antichrist. And this blending of church and worldly power would hand the man of sin unmatched global sway during what's known as the Great Tribulation. Now, in recent times, a number of Catholic priests, some of whom have passed away, have been really vocal about what they viewed as this unavoidable threat of the false prophet emerging from within the Catholic Church itself, driven by hidden satanic, Illuminati, Masonic forces. And these priests didn't use Illuminati, the word, to specifically mean the Bavarian group started by Adam Weishaupt, who was a Jesuit-educated figure on May 1st, 1776, but instead, they actually saw it as a label for a contemporary multinational elite and a cult network pulling strings behind today's supernatural and global political schemes. Something that actually Donald Trump reportedly came to understand as well. So priests like Father John F. O'Connor, Father Alfred Kuntz, and Father Malachi Martin, among others, claimed that this secret group includes fake Catholic insiders. So they argued that since the Roman Catholic Church accounts for 1/6 of the world's population and more than half of all self-identified Christians, that it's a critical tool for manipulating future global dynamics in both religious and political spheres. So I mentioned Petrus Romanus by Tom Horn and Chris Putnam. Well, in that book, and it's an amazing book. If you haven't read it, you should pick up a copy and check it out. But in that book, they spotlighted Malachi Martin, a former Jesuit priest, respected Catholic theologian, and retired professor at the Pontifical Biblical Institute. So Martin, who was a close friend of Pope Paul VI, worked in the Holy See, researching the Dead Sea Scrolls, writing for scholarly journals on Semitic paleography, and teaching Aramaic, Hebrew, and Scripture. In 1965, Paul VI released him from his Jesuit and priestly vows, after which Martin relocated to New York. And there, he focused on writing and occasionally speaking publicly about topics ranging from the fallout of the Second Vatican Council to insider perspectives on papal history, Catholic teachings, and global politics. And as a Vatican Advisory Council member and personal secretary to the prominent Jesuit Cardinal Augustin Villa, Martin had access to sensitive information about hidden church and world affairs. Now, many
Shawnee, I watched the series The Chosen, and they make a big deal out of Peter being called the Rock. But he said to Peter, "Who do you say I am?" And he said, "The Lord and Savior." And he said, "And upon that rock I will build my church. And upon that rock that I am the Savior, I will build that church." Not Peter. And that's how they say they link right back to the times of Christ.
That does include the third secret of Fatima, which we're not going to get really too much into in this video. If that's something that you would like me to cover at another time, let me know. It's just worth mentioning because he was involved in that. And with that third secret of Fatima, many suspect that secret, which Martin implied was never really fully disclosed, actually outlined a scheme to install the feared false prophet during a so-called final conclave, which is really, really interesting given the times that we're living in now. With Pope Benedict's resignation, which Tom Horn perfectly predicted down to the exact month and year, and the rise of the first Jesuit pope, Martin's novel Windswept House takes on a lot of relevance here. So in it, he portrayed a pope being covertly pushed out, perhaps that could be Benedict, and succeeded by a Jesuit supporting figure, perhaps that could be Francis, whose aid in establishing a new world order. That was the whole point. So Martin alleged that an Illuminati-backed faction had penetrated the Vatican's top ranks, steering it towards this global agenda. Some even speculate that this same group, maybe the Masonic superforce that he cautioned against, played a role in his sudden and, to some, suspicious death in 1999. So could he have been silenced by those he accused of manipulating the Vatican to usher in a worldwide Antichrist system? Many think so.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's worth noticing, or it's worth noting how charges of apostasy are piling up, or have been for a while, have piled up against Francis from other corners too. So a slew of prominent Catholic websites, blogs, and forums are buzzing with debates about how he's been steering the church towards a split, ironically echoing the prophecy tied to his namesake, Francis of Assisi. That saint famously foretold of the last pope. So again, this is the namesake of Pope Francis. He took
Wow, I never knew that.
his name from Francis of Assisi, and this is what Francis of Assisi said, quote, "At the time of this tribulation, a man not canonically elected will be raised to the pontificate, who, by his cunning, will endeavor to draw many into error and death. Some preachers will keep silence about the truth, and others will trample it underfoot and deny it. For in those days, Jesus Christ will send them not a true pastor, but a destroyer," end quote. Isn't it strange that he would take his namesake from him? You know, because this would clearly be talking about Pope Francis, if it's accurate. You know, if that's a real prophecy there. So very, very eerie, very strange. But even a well-regarded Italian Monsignor, once a consultant for the Vatican's Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, has publicly urged Francis to put an end to the confusion and apostasy that he's stirring among priests and bishops by correcting his ambiguous and erroneous words and acts. Yet, Francis moved swiftly to oust dissenting leaders and swap them out for supporters, including fellow Jesuits, which is another red flag that Malachi Martin raised in his warnings. Well, some time ago, Francis intensified his campaign against conservative Catholics and those focused on prophecy, taking aim at the American religious right, including Steve Bannon, who was an advisor to Donald Trump. And that unsettling shift led Jose Gallet, the head of a major Catholic TV network, to openly declare that Pope Francis is the false prophet who, in his views, is paving the way for the Antichrist. Gallet also insisted that Benedict, whom he considered the real pope, was somehow coerced into stepping down in 2013. And he claimed that Francis, quote, was elected by a mafia of cardinals, end quote, aligning with other Catholics already noted who suspect a hidden plot behind the rise of this unprecedented Jesuit pope. But maybe one of the strangest twists came when the Vatican opened an investigation into a Catholic group of exorcists called the Heralds, who, after reportedly consulting with Satan himself, concluded that Pope Francis, quote, is the devil's man, end quote. But there's a curveball here. What if Francis isn't actually Peter the Roman or Petrus Romanus, the last pope in Malachi's prophecy? What if that shadowy superforce of Catholic Freemasons, which Malachi Martin flagged as a threat, is exploiting Francis and his progressive leanings to pull off an elaborate end-time scheme? Could they be reshaping Rome into a socialist Marxist tool to set the stage for the true final pope? And what if the same George Soros-backed globalist crew that opposed Trump from his first term is now collaborating with Francis to pave the way, or at least has been, to pave the way for the Antichrist's worldwide reign straight out of Revelation? Well, a number of people believe that Francis was not legitimately canonically elected. Hey everyone, You know,
See, that doesn't matter if he was canonically elected or not. He was still the Pope. It doesn't matter how he got there. He was still the Pope. So he's clutching at straws here, I think. On this one, anyway.
Number 112, Petrus Romanus, could step into that role. And the weird circumstances behind this alleged placeholder false pope, it might not ever be completely uncovered, but mystics like Father Herman Bernard Kramer hinted at such a possibility in his book, The Book of Destiny. Now, this guy's a mystic, and I don't agree with his interpretation of Revelation, but it was important enough for Tom Horn to talk about, so I think we should get into this. So, in a distinctive reading of Revelation chapter 12, specifically the Great Wonder in verse 1, Father Kramer noted, "The sign in heaven is that of a woman with child crying out in her travail and anguish of delivery. In that travail, she gives birth to some definite person who is to rule the church with a rod of iron," verse 5. It then points to a conflict waged within the church to elect one who was to rule all nations in the manner clearly stated. In accord with the text, this is unmistakably a papal election, for only Christ and his vicar have the divine right to rule all nations. But at this time, the great powers.
And Shawnee, don't forget Peter sunk in the waves, not trusting Jesus.
May take a menacing attitude to hinder the election of the logical and expected candidate by threats of a general apostasy, assassination, or imprisonment of this candidate if elected. Okay, end quote. Now, even though I don't align at all with Kramer's take on the Book of Revelation, neither did Tom, but still, his concern that great powers may take a menacing attitude to hinder the election of the logical and expected candidate, that strikes a chord with the worries of priests highlighted elsewhere in the book Petrus Romanus. They too foresaw a looming crisis for the church, one that would pave the way for the emergence of the false prophet and Antichrist. Now, when Jesuit Jorge Mario Bergoglio became Pope 112, that's Pope Francis, taking the name Pope Francis, he quickly made several intriguing moves to tie himself to the Peter the Roman label from the prophecy of the popes. So first, he chose the name St. Francis of Assisi, an Italian Roman friar born Giovanni, but later known as Francesco di Pietro, or Peter di Bernardone, a name that directly translates to Peter the Roman, matching the prophecy's final line. Second, Pope Francis is well aware that Francis of Assisi was a prophet who warned that this last pope would, quote, be raised to the pontificate, who by his cunning will endeavor to draw many into error and death, for in those days Jesus Christ will send them not a true pastor, but a destroyer, end quote. Now, it's striking that Francis would adopt the name of someone who issued such a dire prediction about the final pope. And then third, and this one's really important, he appointed Pietro Parolin as the Vatican's Secretary of State, a figure whose name also evokes Peter the Roman, Pietro Parolin, and who could ascend to the papacy if Francis steps down, as Benedict did.
Yeah, Phil, with Peter, mate, with what you just said about Peter, that had nothing to do with the Catholics, though. He was the first church. I didn't know that, but if that's true, that don't mean the Catholics were involved. I know that's not what you're saying. I'm just saying that.
Passes away, possibly, or is killed. If Francis's election wasn't canonical, Parolin could even be seen as the true Pope number 112 in that case. And notably, the New York Post recently pegged Parolin as the leading candidate to be the next Pope. So it's possible, if Francis was never really a legitimate Pope, that, and if this Pietro Parolin person becomes the next one, if Pope Francis passes away, that could be the real final pope, number 112 in the prophecy of the popes. And then we got to keep in mind the final words from the prophecy of the popes itself, which says, quote, "When these things are finished, the city of Seven Hills will be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge his people," end quote. Certain Catholics suspect that something illegitimate might have taken place behind the scenes at the last conclave, suggesting that, for reasons still unclear, Francis was slotted in as a temporary placeholder until the true Pope 112, Petrus Romanus, could take over. And this idea might tie back to his choice of St. Francis of Assisi as a namesake, since that ancient friar foretold that, quote, "a man not canonically elected will be raised to the pontificate," end quote. Now, once more, the murky motives behind a placeholder or false pope remain mostly hidden from the public, but still, it's worth remembering that both Catholics and Protestants have long seen the prophecy of the popes as just one of many signs pointing to Rome's role in the end times. They also connect it with the prophesied downfall of the seven-hilled city of Rome, which I think could plausibly occur if the asteroid Apophis, which we just talked about in the previous video, but if the asteroid Apophis showers down debris onto the Earth in 2029, that could fulfill this. And this aligns with the depiction of the Roman Catholic Church as many equate it from Revelation 17:5, mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Now, of course, opinions are split on that, but a lot of people see it that way. Now, in Revelation, John vividly portrays this woman riding a scarlet beast as a city perched on seven hills, holding sway over the earth's kings. And you can read about that in Revelation 17, 8, and 9. When John wrote those words, only one city fit that description, which would be Rome, the seven-hilled ruler of the world's kings. Now, though Rome's military and political dominance has faded over time, its seven hills endured as a spiritual and a religious powerhouse, really, still welcoming the earth's leaders who would come to kiss the Pope's ring to this day. So the closing words of the prophecy of the popes also, foretell like Rome's destruction. Again, it says, quote, "In extreme persecution, the seat of the Holy Roman Church will be occupied by Peter the Roman, who will feed the sheep through many tribulations. When they are over, the city of seven hills will be destroyed, and the terrible and fearsome judge will judge his people," end quote. That really seems to correspond with Revelation 17 and 18, which describes the fiery destruction. So with all that, it's possible that we're just right now on the precipice of the prophecy of the popes actually legitimately being completely fulfilled. The next pope could be the very last one, Peter the Roman, who might in turn fulfill the prophetic role of false prophet from the book of Revelation, or at least usher him in, who knows. But, as always, we'll have to keep our eyes open to see what.
Okay, guys, I'm out. See you tomorrow. We got Mike from around the world tomorrow, and I start a half hour later. Okay, guys, see you tomorrow, guys.
Happens, and we'll have to keep you updated on any new developments. So, with all that being said, that is today's update video. Thank you so much for joining me, and until next time, take care and God bless. If you are a Bible believer.